Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Thursday, November 13th. I went shopping and I listened to some of this in my car. Tucker Carlson did a long thing, an hour and 44 minutes, on a video entitled Tucker Carlson on the Israel first first meltdown and future of something. Let's call it America. It cut off. Won't tell you the full title. Um, I was talking about this with Candace Owen, and I got into it with somebody who said that only a person who's retarded would believe that Charlie Kirk is dead. You have to be a shill or retarded, right? The person started off by saying, "I really enjoy your videos," and then accused me of gave me the choice of being retarded or being a shill. And the word shill is, when the QBs started to use shill, and the QBs just didn't realize how bad they suck and how embarrassing they were. When they were kind of a fallover from the flat earthers, which both of them had a strong connection to the Old Testament and the Bible. This was, people who were, biblical Christians and, and limited in their ability for abstract thought and these other things. And, then their worldview was propped up by this kind of stuff. But, if you're going to judge people by shill and not shill, or whatever, fool or not fool or whatever these things are, the people that present social media, it's very limiting, right? Now, everybody says Tucker Carlson works for the CIA, his dad's CIA. And I think that that's probably true. Like, I haven't got into that stuff, but that's and he does do things that are frustrating. He'll do something that'll be good, and then he'll do something that's horrible, like the exact opposite. He'll go back and forth. But, when I was saying this about Candace Owen, it doesn't really matter. Like, everybody sucks. And so, in terms of people in the show, because people in the show are different than the rest of us, because they're in the show, right? And they have effect on the show. We have limited effect on the show. We have mass effect on the show, right? The show has to, the show is for us as as the masses, the group of people that they, whatever they categorize us, the useless eaters or whatever. The show is mostly for us, right? So we're the reason. The show is a big psychological operation and, propaganda and all these things. And so the show, where viewers are collectively, and then different groups of viewers factors in, different demographics of viewers factor into the show, right? But these other people are in the show. And so the things in the show that are reflective of what I would call health, health not being so much physical health, but being not even mental health, or just something that's good for you, right? And there are things in the show where people have their moments. Some of these people, I was showing you something with Candace Owens, and this is something with Tucker Carlson. So he does a good job of talking about something that I don't really care about, other than I love to see stuff crumble. The infighting in MAGA, when the Democrats fell apart after the election. When these political parties and these ideologies fall apart because of, infighting, it's a great thing to watch. Because they both suck, and they should fall apart, right? And so he started talking about how this thing started when Trump was sworn in. There was the right wing, there was the people who were America First, like Tucker Carlson, which I already talked about how America First sucks. It's narcissism. So, but somehow the pro-Israeli people, the people who want to put Israel first, the shekel takers, are worse, right? As bad as America First is, the America First people, as bad as Trump is, and how narcissistic it is to think about yourself, it's saying me first or Trump first. But Israel first is even worse, right? Especially for the world and America and these things, and for individuals. And he was talking about how everyone who was not Israel first was labeled a Nazi. And this, the Israel first wanted America to get into one of these forever wars with Iran and fight Iran on Israel's behalf. And so he does a good job of describing the events in this group of people that I don't really care about, but it's interesting. Like I thought he did a good job of it. And then he comes around to this guy here.
Going to happen. They can't win this debate. It's not actually a debate. It's them name calling. So that's going to happen. Rest assured. But in the meantime, the rest of us have to listen to an awful lot of a man who a year ago was unknown to most Americans, kind of a third-tier podcaster, TV host, or radio host, or whatever. A guy who was a weekend show on a cable channel, a guy called Mark Levin. And for the last month, we've been watching Mark Levin say things that no one in my lifetime has ever said from the right. Like this. Watch.
I don't know where there's Jew hatred from the Marxists, the Islamists, the neo-Nazis, the grifters.
Okay, so this guy's talking about grifters when, he's grifting and Netanyahu's a grifter and Trump's a grifter, right? When these grifters talk about grifting, right? Like these grifters talk about other people being grifters. That's one thing that I thought was interesting. But
I don't know where they're pulling us and pushing us. What do they want to do with American Jews? What do they want to do? Where are they taking this country? They're destroying it. Carlson, Owens, Kelly, Bannon, it is a time for choosing. You pick the good guys or the bad guys. You pick America or you pick the Third Reich. They're not MAGA. They're not conservative. In fact, they're more Marxist, Islamist, America-hating, Jew-hating thugs than anything else. And let me educate them briefly.
Okay, so this guy, I'm going to play this last piece, but he played another clip of the guy basically saying he doesn't give a shit how many Palestinian people have to die. They should elect better leadership. Of course, that's all, that whole thing. And then he was calling everybody Nazis. And when he was asked if he was going to debate Tucker Carlson, he said, I don't debate Nazis. And Tucker Carlson said, yeah, he answered my email when I offered him a chance to come on my show and debate me. He offered me an email. He puts in the email, I don't debate Nazis. Which I thought was a hilarious response. But here.
The Babylonians couldn't kill the Jews. The Persians couldn't kill the Jews. The Romans couldn't kill the Jews. Hitler couldn't kill the Jews, and by this I mean eliminate them.
You had to make a distinction with that one.
You think you're puny little asses are going to be able to do it?
Kill the Jews? Your first thought is, wait a second, how do we get to that? Okay. No.
So I want to show you, I'm showing you this so I can show you another clip. And I just want to respond to this part first. So, none of these people are calling for that. I mean, I've heard clips of all these people, and many of them, Megyn Kelly, they were Zionists for a while. This guy, all of them were for former Zionists, Steve Bannon. So what they're advocating for now is defunding Israel, which this guy is, and all these other people are saying, well, that's the equivalent to killing the Jews, right? That if you defund Israel, that's the end of Israel, and then who knows what else, right? If America doesn't, if we withdraw our support for Israel, is effectively doing that. And so, but they're not advocating for that. That's not what they want. They're not against Jewish people. I mean, they may be, but they're not saying those things publicly, right? And so, there's some truth into what he's saying, but it isn't pro-American to be pro-Israel. In fact, it's the opposite. It isn't America first to be put Israel first. I said this about politicians who also want to be spiritual people or be pastors. You can't serve two masters, and you can't serve two countries. You can't. I mean, things are. You're always going to have some self-interest if you're self-interested, especially as a country. Not every country's interests are going to be aligned, and if you're if you're giving massive amount of money to a small country, and then that country in turn finds ways to bribe all your politicians and control the media, then that country is your worst enemy. It's your worst enemy. It's a parasitic entity that's controlling your country and using you as a, as every possible way using you, right? It's parasitic. And so these people are now starting to speak up about it. Of course, this is a kind of rhetoric because they can't debate, like you can't debate Tucker Carlson on the merits of the, what support for Israel is, right? And so, there's people like this that are out there because if this ends up going through, if this ends up, there's a movement afoot to, within the liberal and conservative movement, to defund Israel. And that could happen. I don't think it will. I'd be shocked if it did. But if it did happen, unless Israel was able to make a deal with China or somebody else, and I don't know how they could do that. I don't know what does Israel have to offer anybody else, right? Like, I think they would be just totally fucked. But anyways, that's not why I'm showing you this. So Tucker goes on to talk about Liz Cheney. And he talks about how Dick Cheney died and he didn't, that he honors death, which I thought is stupid. I'm going to make some distinctions here. But he had some moment of self-reflection, which is a good thing. People who get up and say, I was a bonehead, whatever it is. If they're sincere and they change, and those are things that I'm going to get into here, but it's at least a first step of admitting that you have, your own issues here. And he talked about how he hates Liz Cheney, basically, and Liz Cheney slandered him, and so when he was talking about Dick Cheney, he got all worked up, and he said that Liz Cheney's a worthless piece of shit. My words, not his. And that if he was Dick Cheney, he would commit suicide if he had a daughter like her, right? When the day when his dad died. And so he said he took some ownership of that. Let me play a little bit of that for you.
Actually, didn't explain why I was mad at Liz Cheney. I just slandered Liz Cheney, basically. And I said that her father would be ashamed of her, and if I had a daughter like that, I'd probably kill myself, which is an awful thing to say. It's kind of hard to believe I said that. But in my mind, I was thinking of all the people I dislike, Liz Cheney would probably be at the top of the list. And so therefore, because I dislike her personally, because I know her personally, and because I so disagree with everything about her political views, I'm the opposite of Liz Cheney. If you were to graph it out, I'd be on one side, Liz Cheney on the other. Because we disagree so profoundly, I told myself, clearly I must have told myself, that you could say anything you want about Liz Cheney. She's not really human. You can say anything you want, including something really awful and nasty, like if I was her dad, I would kill myself. Who thinks like that? Who talks like that? Well, I did. And so I just want to say I'm sorry to Liz Cheney, and I mean that, too. I mean that.
He means it.
Have said that. I'm sorry I said that. I will not stop disagreeing with Liz Cheney until she changes her views. I hope that she does. But there is never an excuse to talk about people like that. And that kind of is the trap here. Mark Levin is almost 70 years old. No one's going to eat the dog food here, okay? That is not a message anyone's going to buy. So the fear is not that Mark Levin will take over American politics. That's not going to happen. The fear is that we become Mark Levin. By staring at Mark Levin too much, we become him.
Okay, so this is something I talked about in the past, and I want to do a voiceover after we watch these clips, but I'll talk a little bit about it here. And I said this over and over again. You become what you hate. People who hate, when you start hating, you get obsessed with the hate, right? You get obsessed with, the object of your hate. And your hate then wrecks your loving relationships. Like if you're stirring around in bed thinking about, you're sleeping next to your husband or your wife, and you're thinking about, how much you hate something or somebody, and you're angry, and you're emitting anger, right? And it's affecting the person sleeping next to you, even if they're not aware of it. You might wake them up on top of it, right? And then you might even yell at them because you feel so, you're consumed with this feeling of hatred and anger. And this is part of what they want you to feel like. They want you to, like, gorge yourself on you because you have hate in your inside of you. And this is something Tucker Carlson can't say because he doesn't know. This is stuff that's specific to the Sajmark teachings and the spiritual experience that I've had in the system. But your hate is your hate. Like, your object of your hate, which was, in this case, Liz Cheney, is, that changes. But the hate inside you is yours. And you just take that hate and you project it at people. No matter how bad they are, no matter how bad they suck, you want to be able to focus in on the loving relationships and the good people in your life. And if you go down these rabbit holes like so many people do in the truth community, you just end up becoming what you hate. Because the more, this is part of the Sajmark system, that you meditate on, your higher nature, but you also associate with the master of the system, who is someone who, in the case of Sajmark system, is reached the pinnacle of spiritual evolution. And by associating with somebody like that, you become like them. You start thinking like them. You start thinking about them, and you have this love connection, right? There's a difference between loving God and being fearful of God, right? Or being, doing something because you hate the other side. If you do things out of love, you aspire because God's love, it brings out your best. But they want to degrade humanity by getting everybody to hate and be angry and be fearful. That's what the news is about. That's what the show is about. It's to make you hateful and fearful and angry, and then just become the lowest version of yourself, right? And then the people around you, they're all going to be like you, hateful, angry, crazy, all these things. And so no loving person's going to want to be around you, no positive person. There's a great story that this comedian, I forget, he's got an Italian name. He's an okay comedian. He tells stories. I was watching him on Netflix. And he has this story about how he was in Chicago or something, and this drunk driver T-boned his car. And the drunk driver was, like, just inebriated. And the cop, when he wrote up the report, he confused car A and car B, or car 1 and car 2, and accused the comedian of being the drunk guy, even though his car was the one was T-boned. And he was the one who had to pay the fines, and he was out money and his points on his driver's license. And he went and asked the cop and tried to explain it to the cop. And the cop was like, "Get out of here before I arrest you." Like, he was like threatening the guy. He was like a complete asshole. So this guy was battling in the court system for like 5 years. And his girlfriend, his long-term girlfriend, at some point said, "Just fucking drop it. Like, let it fucking go," right? And the story went on for quite a bit. But, this thing, you get consumed with this kind of shit, right? People all have seen it happen and let it happen in their own lives. And that's what Tucker Carlson is talking about here. And he doesn't have the tools that I have at my disposal because of Sajmark system, which I'll get into in a bit. But let's let him go.
Another way of putting it is, the fight is not against Mark Levin and the many Mark Levins out there, the screamers, the slanderers, the impugners of character, the liars. The real fight is within ourselves. The real fight is against our own nature, our own natural inclination to, in the face of Mark Levin, become Mark Levin.
So this is something I talk about. So, it takes some introspection. And even if he's bullshitting here, if he like stole this, I don't think he watches me, but whatever. Like, he, even if this is just plagiarizing, he's doing this, it's still worthy of, people are watching this. And it's a good point because, it's something I say all the time. Everything's an internal battle, but he doesn't have it because Christianity isn't, when you're religious, you're not spiritual, and they don't have it. You're just supposed to accept Jesus. And then there's one more thing he's going to say here.
And the cost is to us. You hurt yourself. Don't become evil. Because what's the point? What is the point? And the only way to prevent yourself from becoming that person is by admitting that you've acted like that person and apologizing for it sincerely, not in a fake way. "Oh, I'm sorry if you didn't like it." No, I'm sorry. because that's wrong. And it's exactly what I don't like about someone else. And I don't like it about myself when I do it. And I'm going to try not to do it again. And of course I will do it. Probably by the end of the show, I'll do it again.
See, that's the issue, right? Because he doesn't have any access to changing what's inside. So let me switch over to voiceover here. So, what makes my show better for me, why I think my show is better than all these people in the show and all, pretty much all these other truthers, is my relationship with the Sajmark system. The spiritual aspect of it and the transmission that I've been receiving for years. This divine energy that I've been receiving for years. And that it changes people internally and it makes them more loving. I don't want to say makes you more loving, but it gives you the opportunity to be more loving. And all of us who do the system have experienced that, right? I'm a more loving person than I was before. And people say, well, you're still an asshole, but I'm like, yeah, but I'm more loving. Right? Like it's an effect of the system. The other aspect, and I want to, go back to what Tucker Carlson was saying here in a second. And I'm, going to find a way I'll include this in the Journey series as well, because it's kind of an important distinction here. But in terms of one of the things that people say about my show here is that it helps them fall asleep. Like people will listen to my show every night and it helps them go to sleep. And these are people often who can't go to sleep and struggle with sleep, and they'll have a good night's sleep. And, when people say, hey, you're putting me to sleep, that's usually considered a bad thing. And it happens to me. When I'm editing my videos, I get relaxed. Oftentimes I'm editing my video after taking a cold bath. I have well water, and whatever the well water is, 50-something degrees. When it comes out, I take a cold bath. And I'll start editing some of these clips. I don't listen to my stuff as much as I used to. I've developed a way not to have to listen to all of it. But, I can feel a transmission. And it relaxes me, and I end up getting into like a meditative state, and often you're taking a little nap. And so like I said, when people say, hey, this guy's putting me to sleep, it's actually a compliment, because the level of stress people are under and the amount of things that people need to take to get a good night's sleep. There's a sleep deprivation in America, mass insomnia, because of all the electromagnetic poisoning, all the, the pollution, the, Wi-Fi and all the rest of this stuff, the content and how everybody is and how fucked up everyone is psychologically, and just the foods and the toxins. And I mean, on so many levels, and the stress level that people are under, the amount of times they spend on screens, all that stuff that, the blue light that they're experiencing from the, the screens they're on, all the things. You guys probably know some of this or understand it. And so somebody can help you go to sleep that when they listen to my videos, it's so relaxing for them. It's so, it's so safe and, whatever, peaceful, that it helps them do something they can't do on their own, right? And so, that is if my show is just meant for that, all this AMSR bullshit and things that they put out there, but something just because the energy that comes through my videos, because I've done this Sajmark system, and I've received this transmission, Pranhuiti, the utilization of the divine energy for the transformation of man. God's love that's given in the system, and also the cleaning to go with it. But I experienced my first transmission when I got my introductory sittings in the Sajmark system in 1993, August 3rd, 1993. It was a Tuesday. I was born on a Tuesday. So it was kind of interesting. And some of my biggest kind of spiritual events have been on Tuesdays. I used to get individual sittings on Tuesdays. I used to work a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, double Saturday. In the first treatment center that I worked at, that was when I started doing this meditation. And, I had Tuesdays off, and so I would get in individual sitting. So there's these things, right? But the energy that I received in that very first 3 introductory sittings was enough to affect me for the rest of my life. Like it still would have been developing, and I received all these other ones, weekly individual sittings, group meditations, and all these things from this energy. And it's had an effect on my system, and that energy comes through me when I do these videos. And so it's a testament to the system, right? And regardless of what Tucker Carlson is, whether he's a legitimate Christian or not, I would assume there's some of that. Whether he works for the CIA or not, his Trump sporting of Trump, his whatever political views, whatever his celebrity is, whatever his, all his other the shit that he's going on. He doesn't have a system that would help him stop making the same mistakes, because the Christian system and the world of psychology doesn't help you remove your hatred. It doesn't help you to remove your gambling addiction. It doesn't help you, these samskaras, these patterns that build up on a spiritual level, right? At least he's kind of aware of it. Like, he doesn't know what it is, but he sees that, at least in terms of what he's saying, like, he could be just copying somebody, but you can see he understands these principles, at least on a mental level, that he listens to people like Mark Levin call him a Nazi, and these people, Liz Cheney, and then he ends up going down their level of behavior. I mean, he doesn't need much help because he's always been like that, insulting people and doing things like that, right? But he can't stop himself from doing it, even though he realizes it was wrong and he regrets it and apologizes. He can't help himself. And there is a system, because I have experienced this system. I mean, it isn't the only system, but I feel like it's by far the best, because it's specifically for this one thing, to pull the divinity from within you and remove all the other bullshit that gets in the way of you being your divine self, right? Being a full expression of your soul. And it takes some period of time. Like, it's not something that takes, days. I mean, some cases it might be, if you were already so far advanced. But, it takes lifetimes. It takes more than just, whatever it is. And the majority of people they don't want it, right? They want to dwell in the world of hatred and anger and fear and, and religion and all the bullshit that goes on in the world, politics, and they don't want to embrace their higher nature. Even though they flirt with it, because it comes out of everybody at some point. People have these moments where they're connected to their soul, they're connected to the divinity within them, but they just won't do it. I took my dogs for a walk. I went shopping, and right before I did this voiceover, I took my dogs for a walk, and there's coyote poop all over the place, and my dogs were smelling it. And, I don't know if I have to use the bush hog to get rid of all our goldenrod. I've showed pictures of the goldenrod and things, in the end of the summer. And now it's there could be a predator in this. It's unlikely, but, it could happen. And, my dogs would be unsafe, these kind of things. And my dogs wouldn't stay with me because when there's a lot of things to smell, like coyote shit, and whatever, I have to keep them, I have to keep on reminding them to stay with me, right? But we're walking around. We have this small chicken house. We haven't really used it. We used it one time. It's got a chicken run associated with it. It's kind of heavy. And the weeds have grown over it. And I was waiting for the winter so that I could move it. It's got wheels, but it's not really, it's not functional. And I looked over, and there's a female cardinal. The cardinals are starting to come back. I have a bunch of them. I think there's one right outside my window right now. It might be a robin. I can see the outline of a bird. But there's cardinals. I'll look right out the window, and they'll be there. Beautiful birds. In the winter, they're very colorful. The females have, a little bit of red and then yellow and some other colors, a neat-looking gray. And she's in this chicken house. And I'm like, how the fuck did you get in there? And I'm trying to figure out how to let it out, right? And I have to go back. It's something I have to deal with now. And my dog Tulsi's going nuts and barking at it and trying to get it. And that's making the chicken bang into it. So I'm like, come on, let's go inside. I have to do this video thing. And then I have to figure out a way I have to figure out how this thing got in there. And I have no idea how it did. It's like almost impossible. Because it's just the bottom of it is, the grass is growing around it that I can't pick it up. There's a chicken run there, and there's a little box, a plastic box, where the chickens are. And there's no way for, I was like looking at it, I'm like, all right, this is going to be fucking a nightmare, right? Sometimes chickens get caught in our chicken houses and things. Birds do, because they like the bird food. But there's no bird feed in there. I don't even know why it went in there, right? But it's, it's the same thing with humans. Like, they get trapped in these things, and you can give them a way out, like this thing with Tucker Carlson. If he really didn't want to say things like he did with Liz Cheney, he could do the Sajmark system I'm doing, right? He could meditate and do the cleaning and experience these things and then work for removal. Pray to God to help him remove this tendency. But instead, he said, well, I'll probably do it again by the end of the show, right? Because, that's where humanity is. It's a good reflection of humanity because, he seems sincere about, making this mistake and becoming what he hates, right, in other people. And yet, they just won't do anything about it. And they, then they think that there's some kind of outward political solution to this whole thing. When the solution is for you to become a better person, to evolve spiritually. Because then these tendencies fall off and all this bullshit that we see and all the manipulation that goes with it, all the lies and manipulation. Because if people are pure of heart, they can't be manipulated in this way, right? If they're evolved, they don't get sucked into this bullshit drama stuff. But, people don't want to be pure of heart. Anyways, so I just thought I'd start the video here, and I'll continue on tomorrow, whatever. Okay, so it's Friday, November 14th. This is like a day where, I was gonna lead with, there's all this evidence that Trump, not evidence, it's been confirmed, Trump is going to Republicans and telling them not to sign their names to the Epstein files. Like, not release them, like Trump is calling them to his office. So I got 4 video clips to do with that. And then all this other information is coming out. There was something on Reddit last night where there was an email that alleged, and I'm not going to show you it. I'm just telling the kind of stuff that's out there on the internet now, that Trump performed oral sex on Bill Clinton, who was known as Bubba, which, it's that kind of level of stuff, right? But if the Republicans who voted for Trump were told that in less than a year after he's sworn in, he'll be openly thwarting the release of the Epstein documents, and then these things will come out from the Epstein estate, there would be, the total disbelief. I mean, I don't know how they're dealing with this thing now. And this stuff's coming out, like they had a relationship, which everyone kind of should know already. They were good friends, and Trump knew all about the stuff at the very least. He's complicit, and probably, he did stuff, like whatever it was. Him and Epstein were perv bros. And so on the same day all that stuff's coming out, this thing was released by Candace Owens, which is almost, really hard to believe that this was the level of thinking here. So there was the Rob McCoy, Pastor Rob McCoy, there's Mikey McCoy, and then there's the other McCoy brother that are all a big part of TPUSA. And Rob McCoy is a part of this Christian Calvary church that Candace Owens keeps on saying is part of some military operation. The problem with her and the rest of these people is that for them to get away with some kind of big, framing a patsy and then doing all the rest of the things, Erica Kirk and everyone else has to be complicit. This has to be pretty much the whole organization, at least the leadership of the organization, and Trump and everybody else, right? It's everybody. And so, but aside from that, this is a story about a pedo, which is, well, let's get into it here.
Actually is TPUSA faith. Who is Rob McCoy? Why is it that these Calvary chapels have a long history of weird abuse and trafficking scandals that seemingly get swept under the rug, right? Why is Rob McCoy adjacent to some of these scandals? I'm going to give you just one, I think, big example here. Okay, this is a true story. I hope I'm saying his last name right. Thomas Kimono was a man who was factually put away into prison for abuse, molesting, lewd conduct toward young girls. By pretending, how he did this was he pretended that his cat was lost, okay? I'm going to read you an email that I received from one of his victims who is now an adult, but she was just an eight-year-old child back in 1995. Here's what it reads in part, okay?
Well, let's listen to the letter.
I was 8 years old, living in Dana Point, California, when Thomas approached my friend and I to help him find his cat. He took us to a park behind my house and tried to molest me before I ran away. I was a key witness in his trial before he was sentenced to 8 years in prison. He molested multiple girls between 1990 and 1995. Now, you will notice that I am not saying allegedly because he went to prison for this. So this is not I'm not risking.
Okay, so Rob McCoy and this guy are going to do an interview, and this guy's going to try to tell a story of which he's not guilty. And it is, and a subject that's not funny, it is like hilarious, like his denial here. And it's this whole thing is hard to believe. That the level of stupidity here, a level of, let's play it through. But it's, I listen to this stuff in the background, just because if I don't, I can't watch all of her stuff, and and a lot of stuff is not going to have anything to do with what I'm covering here, and she's not getting around to Erica Kirk, these things. So, but I started listening to this part, and I'm like, well, this is kind of interesting, and then it's just delves into this. This guy is so fucking icky. Let's just go and watch it here.
Information here. She's not lying. We looked into this. In 1990, Camino was placed on probation for pleading no contest to lewd conduct involving children in Manhattan Beach. That's in Orange County. A few years later, he apparently went on a tear to try to lure young girls in an entirely different county. Okay? Let's read an article regarding that sentencing. Here's the headline in the LA Times. This is from 1995, as you can see. The headline reads, Child molester draws an 8-year term in prison. Thomas Michael Camino, who tried to lure girls with a lost cat story, gets maximum sentence requested by the parents of 3 victims. Listen to that. 3 victims, okay? The article goes on, it says, Thomas Michael Camino, 31 years old, of San Juan Capistrano, was convicted in May of molesting an 8-year-old girl and trying to lure a dozen others into sexual encounters by asking for help in finding his cat. Orange County Superior Court Commissioner Richard M. Aronson imposed the maximum term after the parents of 3 victims rose in sadness and anger to seek a stern punishment. The father of a 7-year-old girl who alluded that Camino said the cat ruse preyed on the girl's innocence. Camino's lawyer said his client, who had previously maintained his innocence, was now admitting his guilt. Attorney Danny Davis sought a shorter 6-year sentence, arguing that the maximum term might harm any chance for needing psychological counseling and rehabilitation. Camino terrorized the Dana Point neighborhood for more than 4 months last year. Prosecutors said he approached young girls, lured them into secluded spots such as a riverbed and the basement of a house by asking them to find his cat. The basement of a house. He was convicted of molestation, indecent exposure, and 10 counts of child annoyance. In the molestation case, Camino grabbed the girl's hand and forced her to touch him. Now, I want you to remember that this happened across 2 counties, okay? I also want you to remember that we're speaking about 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds, right? We're talking about 3rd graders, not toddlers whose memories might be iffy, who might have difficulty communicating things, might not find the right words, might not be sure of themselves, but 8-year-olds who are fully online mentally, right? Imagine yourself at 8 years old in 3rd grade. I have every memory of being in 3rd grade. I have memory of traumas in 3rd grade.
Okay, so what happens is when you turn 7 or 8 years old, your brain does this pruning of all these synapses. That's why you lose all your memories of when you were a little kid. It's like a third or 2/3 of your brain. It's like, there's your brain it's growing. When you're a kid, your brain's growing significantly, and then you have these levels of consciousness, right? And you can track your kind of awareness level if you go back and you think about your time as a kid, and you have very few memories from when you're a baby. Like all those things, right? Because it's just, not only is it, the memory disappears, your brain matter is being pruned, like you're losing brain matter, you're losing parts of your brain as it repurposes itself as you get older. But you don't have the ability to understand what you're seeing. right? When you're a baby, you're just like you're there's nothing there, and so like the memory is just you don't understand what's happening, and so but when you turn 7 or 8, you become your brain is going to be like that. It's just going to grow and things like this, and then of course hormones are going to be released when you're in your teens and things like that are going to change things. But at some point, like when you're in your 18s and your 20s, your brain just stops growing, and that's when that's why we have your brain has a certain shelf life, and then you start losing stuff as you get older. But it's important because this guy's going to basically, and kids are not great witnesses. Kids are whatever they are, and of course they could be coached in these kind of things. And so that's why pedophiles are often not convicted, because of kids are just, I mean, you put a kid on the witness stand, you never know what you're going to get. And kids, and even with what she's saying about the memory. So, but the issue here is there's enough evidence. Like if this guy was doing something political and, he's being framed in some way, right? It still wouldn't matter. You wouldn't put him around kids. He's a convicted pedophile. But in this, bizarro world that we now seem to have more and more of it, Rob McCoy, and there's no need to put him near kids, right? Like, there's just no need for it unless you want pedophiles near kids. That would be the only reason that you would say that, right? Based on everything that, it's hard. It's almost like they want to see. We've entered into a time frame like, how much shit are you guys willing to eat, right? Like, how much shit are you guys willing to eat? Like, that's the stuff with Trump, because there should be no Trump supporters at this point. Like the scandals that are surrounding Trump and all the fucking bullshit he's done and the stuff with Israel, the stuff with, him going to Knesset, like any number of these things, especially now with the truth community, the internet, Trump should be done. Like Trump should be like residing in disgrace. Opposed to what Bill Clinton did with the Monica Lewinsky scandal, which was like years. Like that thing was the number one story for like years. The OJ stuff, things like with OJ, Trump stuff is like, just all of it, like international corruption, its family taking this, billions upon billions of dollars from foreign governments. Selling the presidency. We saw the same thing with Joe Biden. And it's like they're saying, how much shit will these people eat before they react? It's like they're testing the waters. Like, what can they tell us before they revolt? Like, shouldn't the people be rising up to get rid of Trump because of the Epstein thing? We'll get into all that stuff in a bit. I'll show you that. But this thing right here.
When a cousin of mine died in a car accident, despite his conviction, despite having spent years in prison for these crimes, Rob McCoy, the pastor who makes my skin crawl, struck up thereafter and maintained a long friendship with Thomas Camino across decades. Now, that's not exactly a problem per se. Rehabilitation is a thing. The problem comes in when Rob then decides that Camino should be involved in the Calvary Chapel Church, and more specifically, that Camino should have access to young children in a program called Home Fellowship, which put him inside the homes of children. And he almost got away with it until some mothers went online, remembered exactly what had happened, and raised hell about it in 2022. Now, in response to this being discovered, Rob McCoy did not apologize. No. That's not how this works. Instead, you are about to see Rob basically employ tactics of psychological gaslighting. Maybe he learned this from his father, who did this for Navy intelligence, right? But he is going to host Thomas Camino for a podcast episode on the Bryce Eddy Show. He's going to vent his frustration at the people who are up in arms about the placement of this man in close confine with young children without people recognizing that, okay, this guy has literally spent 8 years in prison for abuse. This is how Rob McCoy intros Thomas on his podcast. Take a listen.
I was so compelled because of the gossip. And
this is a guy here, right? This is a guy you're trying to sell to your parishioners as somebody who's a reformed. Well, they're not. He's going to say he's innocent. this guy's story is going to be unbelievable. But like this is, you know, I mean, I don't care about the McCoys, you know, the Hatfields and the McCoys. This battle, Candace Owens, it's the Hatfields, and they're the McCoys. You know, this whole thing with TPUSA, because, you know, there's bigger fish here, like Kash Patel and Trump, and then all the other people that are involved in this, whatever this thing is, this Charlie Kirk operation, right? Operation Charlie Kirk, and whatever distraction that they got from this, that Trump got from this, you know, which would have been one of his, at least his motivation to participate from the Charlie Kirk spectacle, is Trump was, you know, dead to rights with the Epstein stuff. But now it's all coming out anyway. Like it's just a, and you know, and we'll see how it all plays out, right? Like, you know, but this, everyone's going to know that Trump knew, which, you know, I knew when I saw Trump say, Jeffrey Epstein likes beautiful women as much as I do, but he likes them on the young side. He's a terrific guy. When Trump said that, he was done. He should have been done. Like, just, I mean, people are, you know, will rearrange anything, the desperation of people. But this guy, you know, I mean, what's the motivation for putting a pedophile in homes of parishioners? I mean, why would you do that? Like, why would you do that? Let's say he really is innocent, and he doesn't look innocent. He's not going to sound innocent. And really, it's kind of a lot to get somebody convicted of something like this because, you know, kids' memories are whatever they are, and their kids don't make good witnesses. I mean, you know, I worked with teenage sex offenders, and these kids who were termed sexually reactive, and they were just like little sex offenders, kids who had been sexually abused and then act out sexually. And, you know, the horror stories that you would read in these kids' intake files, the stuff that they would be forced to do or they would learn to do, as, yeah, just, I mean, it's like gross. Like, it's just, you know, I mean, humanity is like, human beings are capable of some fucking weird shit, right? Just like crazy fucking weird shit. And, you know, there's not a lot of convictions. Like, there was a Boy Scout leader who had like 3,000 victims. Like, I mean, you know, before. I mean, it's just, and then when these guys are convicted, they're the dregs of society. You know, in prisons, these are considered the worst people. And so when you're a convicted pedophile, that's, you know, let's say in the rare case that you're innocent and you've been framed, then you just, you know, your life is kind of done. You know, like that's just hanging over your head. And you're just, you know, that's your label. Like you should, I mean, you know, you're branded in a way, you know. So, I mean, then this guy decides to bring this guy in. And, I mean, just it's so bizarre. Let's just watch it.
The slander of my friend who's going to join me, that I wanted him to tell his story. So 20 years ago when we were over at Skyline, the introduction was you walked in and you said, I need to talk to you and I got to share with you. And you were just pretty blunt. You just laid it out there. And you said, this is what it is. And you followed the procedures. You did what was required of you. And you and I have been friends. There's been no issues. It's remarkable how you've served this community. I personally made the call that they can make fun of us and they can claim whatever they want to claim, but I wanted your family protected. So I pulled that, I guess it was a advertisement for the home fellowship, which we do for all the home fellowships.
So he's upset, and he goes on to talk about how people online who don't know the full story are digging stuff up, and like this guy's really a good guy. And I'm going to have Camino actually explain what really happened that put him into prison. Let me know if you're buying this story that he's about to tell. Take a listen.
You're not going to. You're fucking not. Nobody should.
So this is like early 90s, the nice little beach community in Orange County. And I get accused of a crime that I did not commit. It's a falsely accused. It's an underage girl thing. And
Why would you put it that way? This is an underage girl thing. Like, holy shit. Yeah, it's you know what it is, right? It's an underage girl thing. Just fucking, you know. And the guy's not going to sound innocent. Well, let's just watch.
the premise of the case is there's a guy running around asking people about a lost cat. And this happens 15, 20
Not people, young girls.
times over the course of 6-8 months, and the whole town is getting in an uproar over
Yeah.
it. So they bring this girl and they film an interview. After I got involved in this whole thing, we didn't know this was part of the thing. They just spring this in trial. And it's this interview where the kid doesn't care what she's saying. She's not upset. She thinks she's waiting for her mom in
Yeah.
a dentist office. And then they just keep asking her leading question after leading question. And the kid's not giving them what they want. Eventually, they get her to say that there was some inappropriate touching on that. She sort of says it, sort of denies it, but it's all they needed. Now they can go out and arrest somebody, and they obviously don't care who they arrest. And the cops had lined up like 16 different guys of a certain look or whatever. And some of us,
Pedo look. The pedo look.
I was one of them, were under surveillance. And so they had pictures of us. And they got enough people to say, that looks like the guy. So they went and got me. Then they come over to my place with the search. They bring me in the search warrant over to my place. And they have 17 specific items that they're looking for. They get 11 of them, which sounds kind of bad until you read what it is.
I only had 11 of those 17 incriminating items. All right, so, he's not a believable person right off the bat, right? It's so fucking bizarre, this thing. This obviously isn't funny, but it's funny because how fucked up he is and how fucked up this is. That this guy told this guy about this, and he decides to put him in people's homes, right? Like, why would you ever do it? And why would he want that to be done? Because, if he was falsely convicted, which happens, not in this case, but it happens, right? But if he was, convicted, they framed him, then you think he would want to be in that situation where he could be accused again? It's just, and all these people are going to freak out. Like all these people, when they find out that this guy put this guy, convicted pedophile, in their homes, right? They're going to freak out, which they did. And instead of the smart thing would be to just let it go or not address it. Like all these accusations that she's given to him, they're not addressing these things, right? They're trying to avoid them and not talk about them as much as possible, as much as they can, because that's what people do. Like they just pretend it didn't happen. And, this guy, instead of doing that, he tries to do damage control by having this guy tell this bizarre fucking story. It's just so fucking, it's like I'm saying about they want to see how much shit people are willing to eat. Like, it's just bad decision making. You would just, even if this guy were innocent and doesn't, he's not, unless it's just some actor or just all whatever, just some story. You wouldn't put this guy around kids, and this guy shouldn't be around kids. Shouldn't want to be around kids because, he's already got this black mark on his, he's basically branded as the worst kind of thing you can be, right? Like the thing, like in prison, you're the lowest of the low, right? In terms of what the prisoners think and what society thinks.
Get arrested. So they throw me in jail, and the next day you're supposed to get a hearing for bail.
Let's pause for a second. So they throw you in jail. The next day you get a hearing for bail.
They're nice enough to do it on. Okay.
How long ago was this?
Like 28 years. 28 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh.
28 years ago. All right, go ahead.
So they
Just fucking, what are you doing? Yeah, it's 28 years. It doesn't matter, right?
I'm just saying some of these details because this whole thing is a total sham. My lawyer comes to me and goes, they say they have footprints, forensic evidence, footprints and a palm print of yours that they lifted from a scene, and they want to cut a deal with you. And they want to see if you want to do a plea bargain before we get to a pre-trial hearing. Jury comes back guilty, unbelievably guilty, and I wind up give me an 8-year sentence, didn't have a record, so did 4 years to change. So I did 1,536 days for a crime that I didn't commit. It actually gets worse. So you get an appeals process, and there's a free process. So they take the three main...
Okay, so what Candace Owens read is crimes. That this he wasn't convicted of one kid and one thing, it was multiple kids. And so And he pleaded no contest, which means that there was no guilty because he pleaded no contest. Which meant that he was saying that he did it, right? And so, like this guy should look into it. They should look into it. Like you got to vet that. You're supposed to protect your parishioners, even if you think this guy's innocent. Which well, why this guy? Like he's weird. Like he's creepy. So why put him in families' homes, right? And it's just like I'm saying this thing where they're just saying, what can we do? Like how much shit can we feed you before you guys react? Like we're getting into that stage. It's just that where people will just accept anything, but not react in any real way. Like just okay, this is what this is what we're doing now.
Issues they can find that are breaking the law or violating your rights, and they submit it. So the appellate court reads it, and they say, yes, we agree. They broke the law twice out of the 3 points, and they violated your rights, but we don't see how it affected the outcome of the case. Dismissed. Wife divorced me right before I got out. So it's my ex-wife's best friend, and she goes, Tom, I got to talk to you. You got convicted and you went away, and your wife was dating your lawyer. And I'm like, dating the public defender? How do you know this? And she told me. So
look at his body posture. He's got closed body posture. Like, I mean, why? Why you bring this guy out there? Why are you staking your reputation?
what incentive does the lawyer have to get me acquitted when he's after my wife? And he gets her.
And he gets her. Yeah, like how is that guy not disbarred then? Like how are you not suing that guy and just getting him disbarred? Like, you know, and then trying to overthrow the case and say this is a mistrial, you know, all these things. I mean, just a not believable story. A creepy guy. Rob McCoy's body posture here. His body posture. And, you know, like, why roll this guy out? Why bring this guy out as public? Why say, you know, and stake your reputation? Also, there's always got to be some doubt. Like, you know, maybe this guy's guilty. I mean, just in general, if you are putting people in other people's homes with access to kids, your organization's doing this, you are going to be worried, right? That this kind of thing could happen, like abuse can happen. That we live in that kind of day and age, especially with these Christian organizations and all the stuff to do with popes and reverends, you know, pastors, and all this stuff. There's a lot of bad history with pedo stuff in these organizations. And so you're going to be worried about that, right? Putting a potential pedo, even if the person didn't have a record. And so when someone has a record, you're like, all right, this is an easy decision. But then to roll them out here and have them tell this fucking sob story and it doesn't jive with the facts that, you know, the things that Candace Owen read. Like, it's hard to believe that this is the decision making, right? Like, why would you do this interview? Like, why would you try to, like, how is this audience reacting to this? I don't know how many people are watching this video, but, you know, how are they reacting to it?
You know this, as she told me. So, what incentive does the lawyer have to get me acquitted when he's after my wife? And he gets her.
So it's just all one big conspiracy that involved two counties, neighborhoods filled with parents and children. A witness who still to this day remembers and emailed me to remind me about this, people who posted and said this is absurd and brought it forward into Rob's church and said it's absurd that you are allowing him to be around youth despite his record.
You know, this is really bad decision making. And when this kind of stuff happens, wouldn't you leave the church? Like, what would be your reaction? Like, it makes no sense. You know, wouldn't you as a parishioner, I'm editing, I just want to clarify here. When you leave the church, like when you find about this stuff, like what happened to me with Dodgy, Dodgy, Kamish Patel, when I found out that Heartfulness was, and it wasn't, nearly as bad as stuff like this. It was bad, certainly bad for the organization, the standards and what it was before. But, it was some scams. It was some slight, embracing a sort of a racist paramilitary group, an Indian one, one of these things. Corruption, a lot of stupid shit. But, I mean, we're talking about where you're putting pedophiles here in people's homes. We'll get into it more here. As a parishioner, you're like, all right, there's plenty of churches. Like, I mean, there's always other choices. And this guy, instead of, I don't know, the time frame, this is like, within the last couple of years, like 2022 or something, the interview and all this stuff. So, I don't know if she gave the dates, but whatever. It's recent. And, this is post Jeffrey Epstein and the world that, like this is bizarre behavior, like in terms of what Rob McCoy's decision making is here. And then to defend him here, like linking himself and his credibility to this guy. And the people that tell this story, like all these criminals have this story. When O.J. Simpson went out to investigate, and he was going to find the real murderer. Remember, like he went and did that stuff. And let's say you are innocent. It just in the court of public opinion, you're fucked. People are going to look at you, and that's what they're going to see. Especially after you're convicted, you're fucked. Like it's just, like that's just something you're going to live with. And this guy, instead of just living with it, and no, that's just not a believable story. It's always these stories and things like this, these liars and these criminals. You go to prison, they all say they're innocent, right? There's very few people who admit that what they did. At the very least, they want to throw shade on, some doubt on it in case there's there's an appeal, some evidence comes out that, brings the conviction into question. If they've confessed and they're telling everyone they did it, then they're fucked. So they want to maintain their innocence because they're criminals, right? And so, the world's just full of like depravity. And so why bond yourself? Why link yourself to this guy? And his weird kids and this whole thing with Charlie Kirk. You have this, thing that Candace Owens can drag out. And, like I said, it's about what are people going to accept? It's like, how much shit can people eat? Because now let's go to the Trump stuff. There's one more little piece here.
Everyone just wanted to get this conviction, despite the fact that the cops, as he said.
There's more people here. I didn't go back far enough here.
Remind me about this. People who posted and said this is absurd and brought it forward into Rob's church and said it's absurd that you are allowing him to be around youth despite his record. Also, his ex-wife and the appellate court. Everyone just wanted to get this conviction, despite the fact that the cops, as he said.
When you're a convicted criminal, and there's people who are, like if your kids are starving and you steal food, or you have to go out and you commit a crime to get money to feed your starving family. There's more things that were like, well, that makes sense, right? There's, people who are wrongly convicted. There's things like that. But, that's a label you just wear. Like, it's just whatever it is. Like, there's things in life where, you are going to be put in a category, negative category. There's people who are going to think bad things about you, especially now with the internet and the rest of it, right? And there's people who, are going to tell stories about you or say things negative about you that are, other people are going to believe. I mean, that happens every day on the internet. Like people like Candace Owens, people, she presents information about people, like me and everyone else. We all do this, that we don't know, right? Just based in what's available on the internet. But when you're a convicted pedophile, when you're a person who's running an organization, whether it be a church or a business, you don't want that to be part of your fucking brand, right? Like you just don't. Like you just can't. You can't have it. As much as you might feel compassion for this person, like let's say Rob McCoy really believed this guy's story. I mean, I don't know why. This guy isn't some person who's just exuding spiritual energy as some great being that's been, whatever. Like he's weird. He's creepy. He looks like a pedo. So, why bring that into your church? Like, why bring that into your brand? Even if the guy was just a criminal, convicted criminal. Now, like again, rehabilitation's real, and you give people second chances, and that's all part of Christianity. But you have a brand of your church to uphold. You have people there. There's people who are working for the church, and that all those people don't. They're being represented by that. If your church gets a scandal, then everybody in that church feels kind of like, they're part of it, right? Like if your church gets a bad reputation, and everyone in town is like, oh, you're part of that church, right? That thing, like anything, you're part of something that ends up being like considered a cult, right? And everyone's like, hey, you're part of that cult thing, right? So like and you have nothing to do with it. And you don't, you're not at all participating in cult-like behavior, but everyone's going to think that, like, anybody involved in, remember that celebrity cult thing, Exum, whatever it is, he was branding people. Everyone associated with that, they're not going to get a job again in Hollywood, right? You were part of that thing. And you can pretend to be a victim and try to come out of that side of it, or whatever, sure. But, like, you're just labeled as that. Like, people get this idea of you. And, this happens on the internet every day. People are defined or made famous or made infamous. And, they might be really good people that just somehow, they're getting this label. I mean, that happens. But when that happens, as a fucking priest, as a pastor, and a person running an organization, you can't bring that into your fucking existence. Your church, your church is more than you and more than the people in it. Like it's, whatever it is. Like any organization, it's supposed to be religious, and so it's just a bad decision. Like this doesn't make sense at all. This is the hill you're going to die on, and then with all this other creepy shit this guy's got going on, it seems like they're just crazy. It seems like these people are just fucked in the head, all of them. Like they're all fucked in the head. They don't. There's no sense of rhyme or reason to their decision making. All right, I want to move on to the Trump stuff now.
I think you're all fucked in the head.
Or interesting when put into the context
One more thing here.
Of the fact that Calvary Chapel, full stop, has a long history of claims of intentionally putting pedophiles in positions of power, giving them access to children. And I'm not talking about
I had some kind of interaction with this Calvary thing. And I don't know if when I was working as, like, I'd heard Calvary Christian before. And I have a memory of, like, maybe a place, and that could be two different things. But, I'm not sure what it was. Like, there could have been, when I worked as I was working with a counselor with sex offenders, teenage sex offenders, and it could have been part of something I've heard the name before. It's like I thought that was a weird Calvary Christian. Why military, right? So I remember hearing the name, whatever it was. Like I have a faint memory of the thing. And so, but, and she seems to always have, like, and this could be manufactured stories. Like she's a shill and they're just feeding her these stories. And just to, put this out there, like, I mean, just to break down any faith in humanity, right? Like this is to break down faith in humanity, faith in religion. Religious pastors are no longer, like when you watch TPUSA gay, they're like, well, Pastor Rob McCoy, or this pastor, they're this pastor. And when they start using the word pastor, like father, like priest, it's to the people that still think that that's a badge of honor. And most people don't. Like they're more suspicious of these people than than they are of normal people, average people. Like that's how bad the brand of these people have been ruined by, the majority of people who aren't, old school Christians. But, if this is true, and I'm sure it is because, she must have something there, like she always has these things. And, at least in terms of the narrative, that why in the world would he be putting pedos in people's homes? Like, why would you fucking do that? Like, what kind of sick fuck are you? Like, this is like horror movie shit, right? Like, what kind of sick fuck would do that? Like, recruit these pedos and then stick them in people's homes. Like, that's going to be a nightmare for you. I mean, just even being self-interested. Never mind having a conscience, having fucking morals or ethics. This is like when I worked as a counselor, these kids would pass through an 18-month program. And, a big part of what I do is talking about people's internal worlds and what goes on in people's internal worlds. And if you go to therapy and you work as a therapist even more so, you realize more and more that people have shit going on inside of them that they can't control. And you guys, I mean, that's going to sound like correct to you guys, like you probably know this as well. You don't think about it. People have compulsive behaviors they can't fucking stop doing. And I'm not talking about just addictions and drinking and things like this, right? Like we've all had things in our lives where you go, why the fuck did I say that, right? Why did that come out? Why did I say, you say hurtful things or say embarrassing things and you just, or just, whatever. You say something that's just not socially correct and you just say, whatever it might be. Like people have things and beliefs about themselves and other people and, just whatever things that come up and things that are buried deep that they don't have any, and this is why I'm talking about past lives and some scars and things. But, there's no explanation in the psychological world, right? People cannot control their fucking behaviors, their internal world. And so as a therapist and as counselor, and then, in a different way as a preceptor, someone who gives these spiritual sittings, you're trying to figure out people's internal worlds. And I used to do psychological assessments, to people coming into an outpatient clinic. And there's these various psychological tests and tools and things you use to you try to get a picture of someone's internal world. And things actually come up. It's fucking weird. It's kind of creepy. It's like, like you just don't want to know, like what's going on inside of people. And so when you have these sex offenders and they're going through an 18-month program that usually takes 2 years, because usually the kids take a while to invest in it. And what you're trying to do is get them to understand their pedo behaviors, their sexually abusive behaviors, and gain some control over that, and then have a relapse prevention so that when these feelings come up, these tendencies come up, and some kids it's really strong, like it's just who they are. Like there was a kid in there that wasn't one of the kids on my client list. He was in my cottage. I didn't interact with this kid, but the people that did were freaked out. This guy his goal was to be a Boy Scout leader. He already had, 15 or 20 victims, and he was acting out sexually the whole time on campus with other kids. He was just an absolute greasy, creepy motherfucker. And there were some kids in the first treatment center that I had like this that were, part of the unit that I worked in, and they were just fucking creepy. Like some of them were like, it was a girl that was 1 year younger than them, something like that. Their conviction or their abuse, it was more in the normal range of behavior, right? And some of them were just like creepy as fuck. They were just warped and whatever. They were like something about them was twisted in some way, and this was who they were. It was the dominating thing in their existence. But either way, as a clinician, I had to sign off on these kids going back out into the fucking world, right? Some of them are going to go back into the families and they abuse their little sister or something. And it's stressful as fuck, right? Because you don't know, like, you don't know if this kid's, they say the right things. Also, you just can't keep a kid locked up forever if he's passed through the program. There's things that went on like this, and then all the personalities, the place was dysfunctional as fuck, and so I just was stressed out like all the time about, the implications of what if this kid goes out and harms more people, harms more children. You're kind of, you're boxed into a situation because the kids pass through, but you don't know, and these kids are just not great kids. Aside from that, they're not trustworthy. They're all kind of shitty in different ways. They were like nice kids that you were like, yeah, this guy's, they were just, they were selfish and abused and, they came from bad situations and they were, criminal type people that were, already many of them convicted of pretty severe crimes. And so, it's something that when you're responsible for that, you just feel bad. Like this would, imagine if you were in charge of something that we were putting pedos in people's homes. Like, how would you sleep at night? Like, how would you fucking, like, how would you be able to cope, right? Like, wouldn't you be worried about that? Wouldn't you feel somewhat guilty and responsible for it? This is just normal human behavior that you would have. But if this church is actually doing this purposely, And people would tolerate that and be like, well, knock it off, you guys. Like, why would you be associated with an organization like that? And this guy is, this guy's really powerful. He's in charge of TPUS Gay Faith, which is a faith branch. And he's also involved in some of these other things. And his kids are involved. So, I mean, like, this tells you everything you know, how creepy. This is Charlie Kirk's supposed to be some religious guy. He's around young people. I mean, he's already pushing a genocide, and he's taking all these shekels. And these people, like, in the upper echelon, we know that they're fucked up. They're fucked up sexually. They're fucked up morally and ethically. And they're just twisted. They're like fucking demonic. Like, they're devil worshippers. I mean, even not like, satanic church devil worshippers. They've gone to the dark side, right? We see this over and over again. All right, now I really want to get to Trump here. Let's get to the Trump thing. So I got 4 videos from yesterday, and YouTube's been recommending all these videos. I got another one from Jen Psaki I'm going to put up at the end of this thing that YouTube recommended this morning. But this is the story, right? So, and I said this isn't going away. The Jeffrey Epstein is something that just has legs. It's a story that people are concerned about and isn't going to go away. And when this thing happened with Charlie Kirk, I said, well, Trump is the big winner. It was the day that they confirmed that Trump sent this weird birthday card where he wrote his name and pubic hair. Like, what kind of weird fuck would do that? Like, who would sign their name, would draw a picture of a girl and sign their name and pubic hair? Like, even if they were framing him, who even thought that up? Like, how creepy is that, right? The word Trump is pubic hair. Like, who? Like that, like, And then Trump was, obviously he was owning it without owning it. And so the next day, Charlie Kirk was killed. And Trump avoided that whole thing. And then the government shutdown. Trump has shut down the government to avoid the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. Like, that should be obvious to people now. Like, that was people were saying it. Because immediately when the government goes back up, Trump starts to go to people, go to these politicians, and ask them not to sign the fucking release of the Epstein files. Like, that was like his first act, as the government is now, it's this long period of time where the government wasn't funded. And this woman wasn't being sworn in. The last vote, the deciding vote, was a woman who was going to be sworn in by Mike Johnson. And this has all been about Jeffrey Epstein. It's obvious. Like, that's what this was about, to keep from releasing these things. But these documents are coming out anyway because the Epstein estate, which is certainly an anti-Trump, the people who are Epstein's relatives, whoever's in charge of that estate is, trying to fuck Trump with this information of his guilt, which is obvious because he's associated. They had a very, he was Trump's best buddy. They were best friends for a long period of time, 10, 15, 20 years here. And so, like, of course he knew, and of course he was involved in this and that. This is, I mean, you can't recover from that. Like, I don't know if he'll last out his presidency, but holy shit, right? And so, like, all this stuff is obvious, and this is what I'm talking about. Like, how much shit are you going to eat?
Yasmin Ansari, member of the House Oversight Committee. First, I want to get your take on the president getting personally involved here, trying to use some pressure on your Republican colleagues to change their vote, going so far as to bring one of them into the Situation Room.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I think the president's personal involvement in trying to pressure and threaten Republican members of Congress to remove themselves from the discharge petition yesterday should really raise the question with Americans across the country as to why this is a cover-up. I have been very clear from the beginning. Oversight Democrats have been very clear. If the president is innocent.
Okay, so, the Democrats have no leg to stand on. For years, they said there was no list. They said this was a Republican hoax, and they pushed back against it. So there was enough in there that the Democrats didn't want this out either, right? This is, so only because Trump has been like Teflon boy, and they can't get anything to stick with him. And, or they've been told that this is just part of the drama in the show. But all of a sudden, they care about this. Like, so that we've already discussed this. But if he's going to Republicans, which this is going to be about that, this segment, because we know about his association with Epstein, and we know about what his administration's done, and we know about all these people, including his own son, including Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and people who are out there beforehand, before they were put in these positions, saying that we got to release the Epstein files. J.D. Vance, pretty much everyone at Trump said that. Right? And then, all this stuff that happened. But we now know that Charlie Kirk assassination attempt at least had something to do with this, because they just don't want to come out, and that the government shutdown also had something to do with this. I mean, these are the motivations, because this is how big it is. So, anybody watching this, the anticipation is fucking building. Like, how much stuff, everything that's to do with Trump is going to come out. Anybody can scan shit with ChatGPT now and pull out all the shit to do with Trump. And it's going to be association, because there's going to be talked about, because Jeffrey Epstein was a name dropper and Trump was his best buddy. So there's going to be lots of references to Trump. It's just going to be, it's going to be overwhelming, the amount of association. And the people who are most Epstein, they're Epstein people who are most concerned about Epstein are Trump fucking supporters, some of his most passionate ones. And so, like, this is kind of an interesting time, right? Like, how are they going to fucking react? Like, how are these QBs and these dumb fucks going to react, right? When they realize that Trump is the exact opposite of the guy that he pretended to be, right? He's an elitist, pedo, fucking enabler, Jeffrey Epstein bestie.
In all of this, and if his allies and people in very high up positions in the White House and the administration have nothing to hide, then they could release the entirety of the Epstein files today. But the fact that they have not done so, and they have not complied with the Oversight Committee's subpoena to release the files, and the fact that Donald Trump himself, instead of focusing on the real issues that Americans across this country are facing, such as affordability and the healthcare crisis, is dedicating his personal time and personal capital to threaten Republican members of Congress, says it all.
This bill, well, we'll see where it goes. I wonder if you're having conversations, or at least hearing stuff from the Senate side. If it gets through the House.
Okay, so, I want to get to these other videos, but I mean, the fact that Donald Trump is thwarting and putting a lot of effort into not releasing the Epstein files, that should be it. Like, he should be fucking done. Like, all the people, all these Epstein people, because they're passionate. This is like the number one issue. This is like abortion. This is like, some people just vote on one issue. And there's all these people that are really, all the QBs, all the people that were right-wing truthers that were, were about Pizzagate people, all that stuff, everybody who's involved. They're just human beings, because this is a fucked up thing. Jeffrey Epstein was a fucked up thing, right? And the fact that there's a relationship with Israel and all that stuff, like, this is bad. That's part of the reason the Democrats didn't want to release it. He has Jeffrey Epstein, if it comes out, and people have access to this in the truth community, whether they cover this or not, the mainstream media, people in the truth community are going to cover whether there's any evidence that he was, it was connected to Mossad and things, which, that's got to come out. And so, like, this is, again, how much shit are people willing to eat? But Trump is stopping the Epstein thing. He's stopping the Epstein truth movement. He is your biggest roadblock to getting the information right now. Okay, so I think her name is Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace is right here. She's a Republican for South Carolina. And she's been someone who's, I think, has been an Epstein person, like campaigned on Epstein, right? Some of these people are fucked now because they want to support Trump, but this is a thing that they promise to their constituents. And she's asked point blank if Trump requested her to remove her name from this bill, right?
With the president, that there is legitimacy in his argument where he says this is a witch hunt. I mean, look at today what the Democrats did today. We're reopening the government, and they just did a great disservice by focusing on Trump today. And I am deeply frustrated with the press. All this focus on Trump, who's been exonerated by the Epstein victims.
Yeah, he's not exonerated. He's guilty as fuck. I mean, there's, we all know. Why is he releasing the thing? You know what I mean? Then release all the files. Because he is the big, I said this early on, he's the fucking white whale. He's the big fish here. Like, he's, when the media or the intelligence FBI goes after somebody, or the media does, they're trying to get the biggest fucking name. The FBI, when they have their press conference, they will cut deals with all the underlings. If they could get the president, they're going to cut a deal with the vice president, or anybody else in his administration, so they can get the president, right? If they can get people to testify against them. Like, Trump is the fucking big Epstein name. I mean, there's a guy, a royal family guy, and we'll get into him. That picture's been confirmed. That came out this morning, the video that YouTube recommended to me this morning. That picture, we'll show you that in a bit. But they had Prince Andrew, right? The guy who was like at some point third in line to the throne. I think he was the next in line after Charles, if I'm not mistaken. Before he had kids, but he's a prince, a fucking prince in England, and he isn't as big a name as Trump, right? So fucking, and she isn't even answering the question.
And we're not focused on the Epstein victims or their stories. Why isn't a former prince behind bars? Why isn't the alleged magician behind bars? Why aren't the alleged billionaires and business people who were raping kids? Why aren't they behind bars? And those are the stories I want to hear, that I want to see the press tell the stories of the Epstein.
I want to hear those stories. I just really want to hear them. Those are fun. Those are bedtime stories I want to hear about.
Because I do believe this is a witch hunt with Trump. Look what the Democrats did today. They released, 2 or 3 emails? The Republicans released 20,000 emails because they just wanted to focus on one little thing. The Democrats redacted emails to try to spin the story in light of the press. Republicans, they released them all. They were unredacted. So
Republicans aren't releasing them all. Release them all. We'll release everything. You guys have the ability to release. You see, here's the thing. The Republicans campaigned on this, that they were going to do this. They were going to release. Trump campaigned on, at least his people did, on this, and they campaigned on other things. Now, Trump clearly didn't want these released because he said he would release the JFK thing, he would release the UFO stuff, and some of these other things. And then we asked him about Epstein. He said Epstein is different. There's all those video clips. I covered this a while ago. You guys probably seen them. Trump is these things are going to resurface. But Trump, when he was a candidate, was the only person saying in his administration in the Republican Party, not so fast. But now they have the House and the Senate. They can release everything. They have the presidency. They have the majority in all these areas. And the Democrats are willing to do it. And so the only thing blocking this from happening is Trump. And that should be it. They should be done. Just from that alone. Like, that's all you need to know. He's obstructing justice. He's obstructing the truth from coming out. He's being the opposite of transparent. And he was best buddies with this guy. They were fucking perv bros, right?
This is a game the Democrats are playing. I think it's disingenuous to women, disingenuous to survivors, to everyone.
This is like, Israel talk kind of stuff here that we're associated with this victim consciousness. Where they're guilty and they just try to spin it that you're the piece of shit when they're the, the Democrats are shitty. They're as bad, in some cases worse than the Republicans. There's all this, on different issues. Sometimes the Democrats are worse, sometimes Republicans are worse, but they're bonded, they're married, they're connected. The Democrats and Republicans define each other, right? You're defined by your mirror opposite, right?
Who has been through something like this, it is disingenuous. I don't like playing politics with rape. I don't like.
What the fuck? I forgot she said that. I watched this yesterday. I'm like, what are you fucking talking about? She doesn't like it. It's something she doesn't like.
Like this, it is disingenuous. I don't like playing politics with rape. I don't like playing politics with child rape. I don't like playing politics with sex trafficking, but that's what Democrats are doing. And
you guys totally did this. You guys all played politics with this. You knew people were upset at it, and you used it in terms of getting elected. And now Trump is trying to back away from this thing because he's involved. You guys are totally playing politics. You both sides are. The Democrats didn't care about this until they knew Trump didn't want it to come out. They're like, oh shit, we got to get this out.
It's infuriating to me as someone this is a very serious issue, And it's one of the reasons women don't come forward, kids don't come forward. We're not taken seriously. We are judged, we're shamed, we're attacked, we are smeared. I mean, my God, I was just sued the other day by a rapist, like allegedly, a man
Allegedly.
that raped multiple women allegedly is now suing them.
Allegedly.
I mean, what? I just, and women, like I myself, like I feel abandoned by the system. I think the system is completely broken. And I'm just going to keep fighting like hell.
Yeah, you are. You're just a champion. You're such a hero. You're defending Trump, and he's indefensible.
For everybody out there. And I don't, I don't care. Let the chips fall where they may, personally and professionally. I can only share my story and the story of other survivors because it just means so much. I want them to know. I want every Epstein victim to know. I want every survivor out there to know that I see you, I hear you, your pain is my pain, your fight is my fight, and I want to do whatever I can.
Except when it comes to Trump. Other than that, we're I'm with you. Like, and then when it's Trump, well, I got to put Trump first and Israel first. I mean, Trump second. Donnie half shekels. I got to put Donnie half shekels second, and but that's just the way it is. It's how it's got to be. Okay, so I just ate breakfast and I watched a little bit of the news. I was closing out the Candace Owens thing and I started listening to the end of it, or what the next part. Well, right before then, like I was doing some stuff, and I had it playing in the background. And Candace Owens read a long list of Calvary Christian pastors who were involved in pedophilia, a la of the Catholic Church. And again, she's a Catholic, like she's going after this thing, and she's recently become a Catholic, and I don't know why you do that, right? I was raised a Catholic. I didn't have any issues. I had a good relationship with nuns and priests. I had no nuns. I went to a Catholic school for 1 year, and the nuns were nice. We used to have nuns over in prayer meeting. My mom had prayer meetings. They were all right. They were good. They were not, the kind of stereotypes that they've gotten, at least in terms of my experience, but we know that there's some issues here, right? But anyway, she reads this list of all these different, pedophile cases that have to do with the Calvary Christian Church. And, there's so much depravity out there, and it's, I worked at these treatment centers, and you would read these stories of these kids and where they came from, and, generational systemic abuse in these families that would be passed on from one generation to the next. I worked in 2 different treatment centers with these kids, and these kids are they're just the dregs of society, and they were just going to be in institutions the rest of their lives, and they were just so messed up, not just the sexual stuff, but all of it. And it wears on you. Like, you get exposed to things that you can't unsee, right? My boss at the second treatment center. So I went back, I worked at as a counseling, in the counseling milieu part of a unit, right? A sexually reactive was what the kids were called, but they were kids who had been sexually abused who would act out sexually. And that was when I had my bachelor's degree. I ended up getting married and going back and getting my master's degree. And then I worked, and my ex had been someone who was sexually abused by her dad. So like I was living with that, right? And she was all fucked up. And so I'm working at this place. It's like in Massachusetts, out in the woods. And all the people that work there used to be working at some plant, like a manufacturing plant that closed. And they were psychology, right? They were anti-counseling. They didn't believe in it. And they were assholes. Like these were, mass holes. They were from Massachusetts. Like Massachusetts produced some of the worst fucking people. And, just like horrible thing. And the fucking kids were all fucked up. The place was corrupt. My boss, this woman, she was in her 40s. She was having these migraine headaches where they were giving her opium, like some kind of opiate, like some kind of, some powerful opiate, because that's how bad her migraines were. And, as a counselor, as a person in the psychological field, you have to, when you have a master's degree, or any of these, if you're a psychologist or you have an MSW, one of these things, and you want to get out and do your own private practice, you have to get licensed. And so you got to work a shit job. They make sure you come out of college and you have to work with the dregs of society. Like they just make sure that happens. And you have to do a couple of years in these, shitty jobs. And you get hours and you get supervised hours. Your boss usually is a supervisor. And they sign off on your hours when you leave. And then you apply those hours. You have to pass a test, which I had passed. You have to pass the licensure test. And then you have to have all these hours so that they can now go take third-party billing, right? You can take insurance payments, and you can do outpatient counseling. So I was working there, and I was getting supervised by my boss, and I'm going to leave, after years of this shitty job. And, part of the job was, let me finish this point here. And my boss goes, yeah, I don't have a license. And I'm like, why the fuck didn't you tell me that? Because then you have to get like somebody to privately, you have to pay somebody, or the agency, the place you're working for has to pay for somebody to supervise you. So your hours count towards your licensure. And she completely fucks me on that, right? And I'm like, I can't believe you did that. Like I said, you knew what you knew, like she just didn't tell me. Like that's how fucked up these people are. Like it's just, whatever. But these kids, these fucking kids that live there and, were part of this treatment center, they're just so fucked up. Like they're just, and I don't like to talk about it because it's so icky. Like, I don't like to think about it. And the stuff with my ex, I used to go home and my ex, who was an abuse survivor, her dad was in charge of some Fortune 500 company when she grew up, and he abused her. And her mom was even more fucked up and abused her like psychologically. This leads to her story. And my ex was a perpetual victim. And she was just in chaos. And we lived in this cockroach-infested apartment in this like place where all these college students lived because it was noisy. We lived above the laundry room, so it was like humid in there. And these cockroaches were everywhere, like tens of thousands of cockroaches. Like just like you turn the light on in the middle of the night and there was hundreds of them scurrying around. They're gross little fucking nests, and it was just like this horrible thing. And it was just this really depressing time for me. Like I was making $32,000, 6 kids, and just this fucking living in poverty and just all this stuff and working with the dregs of society. So I barely talk about this. I mean, I just only like to think about it. I used to cover it quite a bit. I know a ton about it, but it's a plague on humanity. Like the stuff that's out there, it's always worse than you think. My brother counseled Vietnam vets, and he was telling me stuff that was even worse than the stuff that I work with, and just the horrific nature of humanity. You can't even imagine. I mean, just think about the crucifixion and these ways that people were tortured, right? It's just, what people will do and what people are capable of. Like, not just killing for food or just, doing it with respect or whatever, hunting or, slaughtering animals and shit. Like, that's it's not easy stuff to do for people who are alive and sensitive and, not oblivious. Some people get off on that, but like torturing people and just doing horrific shit, right? So, and I'm talking to my wife about this, and I'm like, part of this is how much shit can you eat in terms of the Trump thing. Trump, closing down this investigation, the release of these documents and willfully doing it. But, one of the reasons is whatever's in the documents must be so much worse than how bad it looks, what a bad look it is for him, what brand damage he's going to suffer for suppressing these documents. I mean, the whole thing is like falling apart because I think it's like so fucking damning, and I think it has ties to Israel, and we'll see what it all comes out, right?
I wonder if this now further shades the conversation that Ghislaine Maxwell had with Todd Blanche before she was transferred to a Club Fed style prison where she's treated much better than the high security prison she was in before, the one that the type of people convicted of the type of crimes that she was convicted for usually stay in, the ones that are not transferred to the nicer facilities, obviously nicer being relative. Here's what Ghislaine Maxwell said to Todd Blanche. I think they were, regarding Donald Trump, I think they were friendly like people are in social settings. I don't think they were close friends, or I certainly never witnessed the president in any of, I don't recall ever seeing him in his house, for instance. I actually never saw the president in any type of massage setting. I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody.
Okay, so this guy is Trump's lawyer.
Again, this is what she told Blanche.
And just think about, like, Ghislaine Maxwell was considered worse by many of the people. And Trump has cut a deal with her, and she said things that he wanted to hear. And he gave her, this cushy thing, and he'll probably pardon her at some point. I mean, it's unthinkable, to Trumpers and these Pizzagate people and the Cubies, the QAnon people. I mean, it's just like he's doing this stuff, and I mean, I don't know how they're dealing with it, but it should be the end. Like, this should be a deal breaker for them.
This morning, the pressure is mounting on President Trump and the Justice Department to release all of the files related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation after a House committee made public 20,000 more.
Okay, so just one more thing about this. If you resist releasing something and then your name comes up more and more, it makes it way worse, because they everyone going, "Oh, you're hiding something." So when these letters get interpreted, or these documents get interpreted, if there's some question whether it's what they mean, people are going to side on, "Oh yeah, this is this is more bad shit about Trump," right? Like,
Pages of documents. The House is now set to vote on the matter next week. And among those demanding full transparency, Epstein's survivors. Here is one of those survivors who talked to Aaron Burnett.
We need the government to release everything that's in these files, of course with the appropriate redactions to protect the privacy of the survivors, but we really need this information to be out there so these crimes can be investigated.
It's Liz Stein, not Liz Epstein.
I think it's really upsetting to us that this is so politicized when it's not a political issue. This was a crime, and it's a crime of sex trafficking, and we really just want to see justice for the crime that happened to us.
Survivor Liz Stein there, just asking for justice. CNN's Harry Enton is here with us. Now, look, when you you hear from the victims, it is very clear what they want. They've made that clear again and again. What does the American public think about
Harry, what does the American public think?
Donald Trump has been handling the Epstein files compared to all the other issues that he brought up during the campaign?
Yeah, Donald Trump is underwater on basically every single issue he ran on in 2024. But the Epstein files, the Epstein case, are especially dreadful for him. What are we talking about here? Well, let's take a look at Trump's approval rating on the issue. Look, they're all in red. They're all in the negative territory. But on immigration, he's 5 points underwater. Foreign policy, 8 points. Trade and tariffs, he's 17 points. The economy, 18 points. But look at the Epstein case. He is 39 points below water on the Epstein case. His net approval is 39 points.
How's this guy got a fucking job, right?
In the negative, my goodness gracious. What Donald Trump has been selling on the Epstein files, the Epstein case, the American people, simply put, have not been buying at all, Sarah Seidner.
All right, so is there any sign that things have gotten better, since there have been some things that have been released?
Yeah, okay.
Although released by Democrats.
There have been some things that have been released. Donald Trump has been trying to make some sort of case saying that, the folks don't necessarily care about it. But take a look here. Approve of the Trump admin on the Epstein case in early July, right when you had those DOJ droppings, right? It was 17%. Look at where we were by late September, the latest poll I could find it. 20%. We often talk about Donald Trump having this floor, right, of at about 40%. On this particular issue, he is less than half the level of the supposed floor. There is just nobody in the electorate who is buying this. They do not like the way that the Trump administration has been handling this case one iota.
Republicans have generally said they like what Donald Trump is doing, generally speaking. How do they feel about the Epstein case?
Okay, so you see, approve of Trump on the Epstein case. This is overall, right? And you see 17%, you say 20%. That is way below the 40% floor that Donald Trump supposedly has. How does that possibly happen? It's because of Republicans. Because look at this number. Okay, Republicans who approve of Trump's job as president, 87%. That is basically in line with the long-term average, 85, 90, 95%. But look at the Trump admin's job on the Epstein case. Just 45% of Republicans.
Well, it's crazy, Harry.
Than half of Republicans are.
Okay, so you know, you get it, right? Is there anything else here? No. All right, so let's move on. So let me say this before we move on here. You know, the poll numbers are pretty much everything. You know, they're imperative, they're important because, I mean, for lots of reasons, because Epstein is fucking a big ass issue. You know, pretty much everyone's against pedos. I mean, when you have like the Calvary Christian situation, my wife just called me and she was listening to, she was driving, and I sent her the Candace Owens stuff. Yesterday we listened. She listened to the part about that guy, the pedo, trying to say was innocent. Fucking, and we were joking about that, how fucking weird it was, and how, you know, not believable it was. But whenever there's a institution that goes pedo, it's because there's pedos and the pedos hang out with other pedos, right? You know, everybody has their crew, their people, the people that they associate with, their boys, you know, their whatever they call it, right? Your posse, you know. You know, that you have a certain group of people, you know, people who are into sports or into, you know, whatever it might be. And so with these like pedos and people who are fringe groups that are like, you know, they're ritualistically rejected by, I don't want to say ritualistically, but like, you know, 100% rejected by society in every culture, in every place. They end up hanging out together and they form their little counterculture, subculture, and they create safe environments for themselves, right? And you see these people get recruited, and there is, you know, a natural revulsion to these type of depraved things. You know, in ancient primitive cultures or simplistic cultures, you know, they would put a person in the middle of a circle and start throwing rocks at that person until they saw brains. Like it's a, you know, they just would get it out of the gene pool, right? There was no, you know, none of these sort of, you know, rehabilitation programs and things. I mean, there was a clear you're out, or, you know, banishment or whatever it was. These tribal, village-based societies, you know, for lots of these behaviors that are now becoming commonplace, where more and more people are engaged in depraved behaviors because it's being made okay, right? Things that are, you know, things that are abhorrent or just, you know, detrimental to the greater good of everybody. I mean, there's different levels of spectrum of these things. You know, but in all that, you have the Epstein stuff, where Jeffrey Epstein is, you know, across the board, people want to see justice. And now the Democrats are getting involved because Trump is, you know, there's Democrats who already, you know, a part of, like, we're into this thing. But now you have no resistance other than Trump. Like, Trump is, like, the only resistance. And so this is one of the core issues for his main peeps and his main people, and he's, you know, resisting it. And so his poll numbers on this mean everything because it's one of the core issues for his most fervent followers. And even in that, he think, you know, whatever their strategy is, he knows it's better to look guilty than have the fucking real information come out, right? There just has to be one or two like really damaging things in there against Trump, and he's fucked. And I think there's quite a bit. And, you know, he's already fucked. Okay. So this is the video I was recommended today. Let's start here.
In the United States have already seen reporters break lots of big stories from these documents. I actually think one of the most important revelations...
Now, of course, Trump knew about the girls, right? That's for piece number one. Of course he did. Like, he said things that you knew he knew fucking, you know, years ago. I knew he knew. When he said that Jeffrey Epstein's a terrific guy, he likes girls, beautiful women as much as I do, but he likes them on the young side. Now, Trump liked him on the young side. So how the fuck did Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, whatever's young to Trump is, you know, 1920. I mean, in terms of what he's willing to do. So what was Jeffrey Epstein? So of course he knew, right? And then all the other stuff with Trump. He's a seedy fuck.
In these documents hasn't gotten a lot of attention in the United States quite yet. But it is a huge deal overseas. The story centers around this photograph that you can see right there on your screen. A photo that shows Epstein's fellow monster in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, as well as then Prince Andrew, who has now, of course, been stripped of his title by the British monarchy. But to avoid making things very confusing, I'm just going to keep calling him Prince Andrew. And that girl in the center, with Andrew's hand around her waist, is then 17-year-old Virginia Giuffre. the late Epstein survivor who tragically died by suicide just this past spring.
Why would you believe it's suicidal? Like, why would you believe Epstein's suicidal now that you see the amount of cover-up and the pushback from Trump and all these things? And, you know, why would you just accept that, right? But here's the thing.
Now, here's what Giuffre alleges happened that day in her posthumous memoir, Nobody's Girl. Giuffre was 17. She was staying with Epstein and Maxwell at Maxwell's home in London, just about 7 months after Maxwell had first recruited her from Mar-a-Lago. Well after Epstein had allegedly started sexually abusing Giuffre. Maxwell woke her up that morning telling her it was going to be a special day, that she was going to meet a prince. And when Prince Andrew arrived at Maxwell's house that evening, Maxwell asked Prince Andrew to guess Giuffre's age. The 41-year-old prince guessed correctly, 17 years old. Now, realizing that her mom would never forgive her if she met someone as famous as Prince Andrew and didn't pose for a picture, Giuffre got her camera, and Epstein snapped the photo. Then they all went to a nightclub. Prince Andrew bought Giuffre a cocktail and danced with her. And on their way back to Maxwell's house, Maxwell...
She said that he sweated like a pig and he was disgusting, like dancing.
told Giuffre, when we get home, you are to do for him what you do for Jeffrey. Now, I'm going to spare you the rest of the truly wretched details. But Giuffre says that she and Prince Andrew had sex that night at Epstein and Maxwell's direction. And it was the first of 3 such encounters, which she also details in her book. Now, both Maxwell and Prince Andrew have both vehemently denied any of this ever happened. And a key part of that denial has been asserting that this photo, the infamous photo of them with a 17-year-old Giuffre, is fake.
Of course it's not fake.
Well, it's a fake. I don't believe that. I don't believe it's real for a second. In fact, I'm sure it's not. There's never been an original. And further, there's no photograph. And I've only ever seen a photocopy of it. I don't believe it happened. And certainly the way as described would have been impossible.
Just to clarify, sir, you think that photo has been faked?
Nobody can prove whether or not that photograph has been doctored, but I don't recollect that photograph ever being taken.
Crazy. Why? I mean, why? Well, I mean, does it benefit you to not recollect?
Now, in addition to just denying the story, both Andrew, Prince Andrew that is, and Maxwell were adamant that, of course, the photo was faked, as you just heard them say. Even just this
They've just heard that to say that.
Summer, in Maxwell's interview with Trump's personal lawyer turned deputy U.S. attorney, Todd Blanche, she flat out denied it. When Maxwell was asked about this particular photo that I've been showing you, she said, quote, "I believe it's literally a fake photo." That was just a couple months ago. But now, thanks to the trove of 23,000 documents from the Epstein estate that the House Oversight Committee released yesterday, we have this. On July 1st of 2011, just months after this photo was first published in the British tabloids, Epstein allegedly sent an email in which he said, quote, "Yes, she was on my plane, and yes, she had her picture taken with Andrew." Epstein denied, of course, everything else that took place and seemed to defend the photo by adding...
Right. So, of course it's real. Like, of course, you know, I don't know why people have such trouble believing these things. And, you know, it's a problem with the truth community. But having done the work that I've done, and, you know, just reading the case files of these kids that were inside these, you know, these treatment centers, and there's thousands of these places all over the country filled with hundreds of these kids. You know, and then there's all the kids that aren't in treatment that are acting out or being abused. Like, it's a fucking plague on humanity. It's, you know, prisons are littered with people who were abused as kids, sexually, physically, all these things. I mean, just grew up in hellish environments. And then you just think about, like, biblically, like, you know, the crucifixion and all these things throughout history. You read about any of these empires, you know, Genghis Khan, whatever his name is, and these other, you know, I mean, Alexander the Great, all these things. You understand what was done in war, what people were willing to do, and then, you know, what happens when an army passes through a city and what they do to the, you know, raping and pillaging and doing all this shit, and, you know, burning of the South, like just, you know, burning whole cities. I mean, just all the things that are done, you know, that people are capable of doing. And so these people who are in power always are involved in this kind of stuff. This is why they want power. Like if you were seeking political power, like most of you, all of us listen, me and all of us, you guys listening to this, the majority of us, or maybe all of us, we think we'd want it in the beginning. Like I knew as a kid I wouldn't want any of these things, right? Like I knew, as I got older, certainly, this idea of fame and fortune and being famous and, whatever celebrity is like a bad thing. You could just tell that it's not what they try to make it out to. These people are miserable and they get more and more depraved. But as you started going through the belly of the beast and you started making deals with the devil in multiple forms to get your power, and you see the depravity, at some point, good people are just like, fuck this. I don't want any part of this, right? And some of the good people would just be right off the bat, I don't want any part of this. Even if it wasn't, based in your moral integrity, just for your own, I don't want to be around these creepy motherfuckers. This is gross. I didn't know it was like this. And so the ones that pass through that, who don't mind it or actually like it, most of them actually like it, they're the worst of the worst. They're the dregs of society. And it should be obvious to everyone. And they all engage in something. They'll have their vices. But if they're not engaged in something, they know about it. Because it's like a depraved, eyes wide shut party fucking, organizations and, governmental things and, these corporations and all these things. It's just this depraved, eyes wide shut lifestyle that these guys engage in. And so, you would always say, yeah, that's probably true. You wouldn't be like, no, people won't do that. I mean, you should know that. Everyone should know that by now, especially as you get older. And you just see what's going on with people, with humanity. Okay, I don't know. This guy, Harry Cole, saves the West. Tucker Carlson on Harry Cole saves the West. So this guy is a shekel-taking Israeli shill. And he decides to try to convince Tucker Carlson to disavow Candace Owens. Now, this is whatever staged. I can't imagine this guy thought that this was going to go smoothly, but it's kind of funny.
Your very good friend Candace Owens has been putting out some pretty wacko stuff, I would say, would be my opinion, on the death of Charlie. It's not helpful, is it, that at that time of an incredible national upheaval, and obviously personal and familial family tragedy, to have someone like that picking apart the argument and suggesting that there are darker forces at play here.
Why is it not helpful? It's not helpful just to ask questions about some bogus official story. We're just supposed to, think about this fucking how much a shill this guy is. To say it's not helpful to ask questions about
that the U.S. government have a hand in covering up. Can you see why people get upset by that and would like you perhaps to sort of distance yourself from that sort of thing?
This is classic. Like his shitty laugh is actually, it's a good moment here for Tucker.
Pretty funny. So am I going to attack Candace Owens because you think
I'm not asking you to attack her.
Probably not going to do that, Harry.
No,
probably not going to do that. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt as a foreigner of not understanding our politics, but the whole ritual of, this person said something I don't like. In order to be a good person, you must denounce this person. Obviously, I would die before I played along with that. I don't know anyone who's saying that who has the moral authority to compel me. I don't know anyone saying that it was any moral authority at all. And I would say broadly, not about Candace, whom I love, but about all people, getting to the truth is the most important thing. I've devoted my life to it. I haven't always done a very good job at all, but it's
still... Yeah, you don't get to the truth by searching through lies. That's one of the unique things I talk about here. Again, this is great. This is a great moment. And it's these things are all staged, whatever. But these guys give each other cover, and this is a moment that this guy's providing. This guy's being a patsy for Tucker Carlson to be able to stand up for his principles and Candace Owens or whatever. But you can't search through the lies and get to the truth. you seek the truth, which is God, in the innermost core of your heart, and the internal pursuit, and that's how you find the truth. But going through the lies and all the depravity and the government and the corporations and history, and that's not how you get to the truth, by debunking all the lies, right? Like, you find the original truth. Like, what's the truth? Like, what's the truth? What's my purpose here? What's life about? What's God? What's the nature of divinity? Like, those are the questions you ask, and that's how you find the truth. Like, the combing through the lies and debunking people's lies, it just sucks, right? Like, fucking, I don't do that here, to whatever extent. Like, whatever I know. Whatever my opinion is about anything, whatever I see. But, like, I'm not, I don't give a shit. I don't want to fucking, there was a time at the treatment center. There was this kid. He was a lifelong kid. His mom sexually abused him. I've talked about this kid. She was a foreigner. She was like from some European, like a gypsy woman almost. I'm not gonna say the country, but it was Greece. What difference? His mom was Greek, and she had sexually abused him. And we had to supervise their phone calls. And I sat there on this phone call, listening to her, and for 15 minutes she said his name. Let's call him Tom. And she said, Tom. And she just did that over and over again for 15 fucking minutes. Longer. Just saying his name and weeping fakely. Nothing. And he's just listening to this. And this kid was fucked. And the kids who were sexually abused by their moms were like the worst. Because the mom's supposed to be the source of love, and it's way worse when the mom does it. It's just the worst. And this kid was in these treatment centers forever. He lost his visiting resource. I've talked about this kid before. Depressed. He was going to be in institutions. He was pulled out of his house when he was 4 or 5 years old. Whenever they found out this was going on. And then he had been in this treatment center for like 7 years, like 11 years old, something like this. Whatever it was, 6 years, whatever. He'd been there for a long time. And he was going nowhere. And he was angry and depressed and just like almost like a little golem. Like he just, just closed off and just evil. And we caught him stealing stuff. Like, he was really good at stealing. Like, these kids were like crafty and fucking, just icky. And they had me, which I said I was never going to listen to that phone call again. I'm like, I'll quit before I do that again. Like, I said that. It was so, it was one of like just horrible. And there was occasion you had to do what they called stripping the room, which is taking everything out of the room. And like, I had to do that. I never wanted to do that again. And it was just like going through all the stuff this kid had somehow hidden in the room. Like, we didn't even know. He must have been getting it from his visiting resource. But he's a little pickpocket type thief. Some of these kids were like trained to do that. He wasn't, but some of them were. And he had just had all this contraband and all this shit and just inappropriate stuff. And it was just like, gross, like, just all this little hidden. He had found this room. Like, these rooms were just, a nondescript closet in the room. And they had like a, cheap Walmart chest of drawers or whatever, industrial, prison type stuff. And he had found nooks and crannies to hide shit in. And it was like fucking, it just was never ending. And I was like, oh my God, it's like you're picking through just all this depravity. And, when you have to like fact check your significant others or, your people in your life, you have to try to catch them in lies and, spy on them. You just go down this dark, what Tucker Carlson was saying, you become evil, right? You're like trying to convict Gollum, these low life fucking, whatever it is. And you just don't want to have to do that. Like, you just don't have to fucking comb through the lies. Like, it's just bad for you. Like, seek the truth. Look to the higher. What I was saying earlier on with this stuff with Tucker Carlson. Look to the higher, right? Seek the higher. Don't, go after the lower. Seek the higher. So, anyways, like if you are focused on what you hate, you're going to become that. like if you focus on like criminals, you're going to become a criminal. So you focus on, good people, saints, and higher developed, inspirational thing. That's a problem with the truth community. People just want to stick their fucking faces in the rabbit hole in the cesspit, and you wonder why you feel bad, right?
Still remains to this day my animating motive. I want to know what the truth is. Again, I don't always get there. I often usually don't get there. But I want to be the guy who cares what's true. A. B, if you're telling me that because the U.S. government or some law enforcement agency issues a statement that doesn't even make sense, that I'm required somehow morally to accept that and not ask any questions, like, can you hear yourself? I mean, what are you saying?
No, I'm just saying. I'm trying to understand that.
No, I'm trying to understand. Why don't you answer my question? No, hold on. What are you saying? So if you're saying that if a law enforcement agency issues an explanation that doesn't actually answer like basic key questions about what happened, that I'm somehow a bad person for asking a follow-up question?
No, I don't think. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that why there is a legal process undergoing and why a guy is standing in an American courtroom today, potentially facing the chair.
Okay, so you get the idea here. I mean, just the gatekeepers. It's crumbling, and you can see it crumbling. And what it reveals is, when the truth comes out, like if it comes out the way people think it's going to come out, like the whole InfoWars idea, there's one outcome. People lose complete faith in the system, and the system collapses. When you lose faith in the system, you lose faith in the monetary system. You question everything. There are runs on the banks. People panic. When people realize what we already know collectively, this whole system's propped up by perception. As long as people perceive that the system is somehow inherently good, and they perceive that there's some hope, and there's this hopium, there's some way that this thing can be turned around. As long as that's the case, then things are great. Yeah, sure, we can do that, right? We can overcome. But as soon as they realize they can't, then it's fucked. Like it's 100% fucked. Anyways, I'm going to stop here today. I'm going to leave this open. I don't think anything's going to happen today. They might do some more Friday night document dump, but I can wait and cover that. This video's going up tomorrow and Saturday. And they'll either skip a day Sunday or whatever. I'll see what goes on. They'll probably put out something Monday. So I'm going to get some comments, and if anything else happens, I'll add it here. And then I'll, read some comments, and then we'll move on. Okay, so this guy, one more thing he said here.
I'm saying is spectacularly unhelpful to have conspiracy theories, questioning the.
Unhelpful to whom?
Unhelpful to the hopefully getting justice for the guy that put a bullet in that young man's neck.
You're saying that he fucking did it, like you know nothing about it, right? You just some bullshit evidence they've released, certainly not convictable, and he hasn't gone through a legal process, but you're already convicted. This is the thing, right?
In what sense? Why is it okay? If a government issue, I mean, I think this is kind of why your country is jumping off a cliff collectively, because it's like, well, the government said so.
Yeah, government said so. All right, so there's that. Okay, a lot of great comments. So somebody sent me a comment saying Erica J. Kirk did this thing with Calvary, Erica Franzala. Erica J. Franzala. She did a interview some years ago with this Calvary Christian stuff. So in a way, Candace Owens might be shitting on her, kind of in a sideways way. But either way, a bunch of people mentioned Bernadette in the comments in my video. Why did Erica J. Kirk, TPUSA gay, and other shekel takers are demanding you be quiet? And I'm like, who the hell is Bernadette? I have no idea who that is. I don't want to rewatch my video. But a bunch of comments on that. Somebody wrote, can you do an expose on Mark Dice? And I'm like, is Mark Dice still alive? Is he still doing that bullshit that he used to do? I don't do exposés, but there was a blast from the past there. And so epic comments here. I'm going to do these comments, and then I'm going to wrap this video up. I got a lot of stuff for next video already. Got a great commercial for some pharmaceutical with some really funny side effects. Funny if you don't take it. But there's always one person that will defend the indefensible, or will become all dickish about in this case, foreskins. But there was actually two morons that came through and tried to debate me over why you should get your foreskin clipped, right? And so, these people who just don't want to let go how fucked they are in the head from their Bible. And the person wrote a very long comment, and there was a dickish line at the end. Try harder, think a little deeper to me. So I'm going to go in hard on this comment. I just want to explain why. He did me a favor by saying that stuff originally, by being a dick about it. But let me just start with the beginning of the comment here. I got to find it. That was the second comment. So here's the first part. I got to make it a little bigger here. And so to the same video I discussed earlier, the foreskin served a purpose when we were still running around in the bushes naked. If it protected the knob from thorns and stuff. Then once we started wearing clothing, it became unnecessary and a health risk in the days before soap. Also, sucking on the circumcised weenie isn't weird shit. Saliva has natural antiseptic properties. If you have no penicillin or honey in hand, it makes sense. Yeah, then why are you still doing it now? Because we have all those things. You're defending these weird motherfuckers sucking on babies, after they've cut off their foreskin. This is a fucked up thing. And it was never a fucking solution. Because there's all this bacteria. Your mouth has more bacteria and shit in it than any other. It's just, fucking, why are you defending that bullshit, right? You're defending that shit. But let's start with the foreskin served a purpose. We were still running around the bushes naked. It protected the knob from thorns and stuff. Once we started wearing clothing, it became unnecessary and a health risk. So that's the bullshit that they tell you, right? That's their bullshit story. The problem with that is, and I just searched this from Gemini, there's all these, there's little known about certain things like the thyroid and some of these other things. But the foreskin, they don't do much research because the mainstream medical community is pushing that you get it cut off, right? And so, they have these things that they think are unnecessary body parts. Your tonsils, your appendix, your appendicitis, your appendix, your gallbladder, things they just pull out of your body, and it's like, well, you don't need that, right? There's no reason for that thing anymore. And so I asked the question to start off with about the amount of nerve endings in the male foreskin. There's more nerve endings in the foreskin than there is in the penis, the head of the penis. Plus the part that is exposed is called the glands of the penis, and that is now exposed. It's being covered up for a reason, right? And it's also being dried out because the foreskin keeps it moist. And so you can go. There's all these websites that that tell the alternative story of what kind of damage it's done and what it does to men psychologically. I mean, it's a form of fucking, it's like, genital mutilation, right? And so the general scientific consensus supported by historical studies is that the human foreskin contains a high concentration of specialized nerve endings and sensory receptors, contributing to its erotic and tactile sensitivity. And so it diminishes your sexual pleasure in these things. Like it's taking out a big chunk of your nerve endings that are supposed to be there. Also keeping the glands from drying up. So it's like fucking, it has a purpose. And these dumb fucking evil motherfuckers were cutting it off for whatever reason. So it isn't something, dude, we got clothes now. We don't need this fucking thing. Hey. Like it's dumb fuck. Like it's what dumb fucks say. That's the kind of thing that dumb fucks repeat when they hear other fucking people, either dumb fucks or evil people, tell them something, and they just repeat it, and then they think that they're critical thinkers, and they're outsmarting you, right? Corpuscles and sensory bodies. The foreskin contains high concentration of specialized encapsulated nerve endings called the mesmer corpus and the Panacean corpuscles. the mesmer corpuscles, the Panacean corpuscles. These specialized structures are responsible for sensing light, touch, vibration, and pressure. Research has shown that the frenulum area, the ridge underneath the glands, has a particular high density of these corpuscles, comparable to the density found in the fingertips. And so it goes on here. All these various nerve endings. There is, high density of specialized sensitive receptors. The density determines the skin sensitivity. So there is, it also means it's painful. Something with a lot of nerve endings, when you cut it off, it's painful. And they just did this to babies because babies cry anyway, right? Is this baby crying? I don't know. I mean, it's a horrible thing to do. And, it's done to 70 to 80% of males here, males. And like what it says here, the question of how many nerve endings are in the male foreskin in the area is an ongoing discussion because they're not sure. Like they don't even know what's going on because they're not looking into it because they don't want you to know that there's actually a purpose for this thing. And it's just a part of, it's an extra charge. It's a major surgery that you're getting within, hours of your birth in many cases. You're there that day. They're going to fucking, again, you're not ready for anesthesia or anything like that. They're like, oh, babies don't feel shit. Let's just rip this fucking thing off. Right? And I mean, it's horrible. Let's operate on their most sensitive part of their body. You ain't going to win this fucking argument because you're fucking wrong, right? You're wrong on every level. The Bible's full of shit. So are you. So here's the other part. So when it's done in the hospital during birth stay, it's between $300 and $1,000. A lot of these people are on Medicaid, Medicare, whatever, Medicaid and so it's going to be paid by the taxpayers. Other people, they're having to pay this whatever part of their whatever their insurance company covers, but they're going to have to pay between $300 and $1,000 for this unnecessary and abusive surgery. If you go into your pediatrician and afterwards, like you give it some time, it's between $400 and $1,500 dollars, and then some of these other things. Religious circumcision, $500, a mola, to $1,500, right? So that's a lot of money for something that's unnecessary and just a bullshit thing, right? And so again, it's just you buy into something because you've been indoctrinated. You never learn to think for yourself, especially when it comes to the Bible, and their obsession with foreskins. It's a weird fucking thing. And like I said, there's always a dope or two that are going to defend the indefensible. And I didn't read the whole comment. So it was a long comment. So I realized this guy was defending the foreskin, but I didn't know he's defending the putting your mouth on the rabbi sucking the baby's what. Like I don't even want to say the word because it's so fucking creepy. And like he's defending that, and you can see there's like videos of it out there. Like they're doing it, like they do it now. And there's all this fucking medical knowledge of things. And like I said, your mouth has got more bacteria than any part of your body. So it's like especially these old creepy motherfuckers, right? So it's gross and it's wrong. Okay, so there's more. I just went, on a Gemini thing. Google Gemini. The male foreskin, I asked, what purpose does it serve? The male foreskin, or pupus, is highly specialized double-layer fold of skin that covers the glans head of the penis. Its function has been a subject of debate, but research indicates it serves a protective, mechanical, and sensory roles. Protective and hygiene. The physical barrier protects from sensitive glands from abrasive friction caused by clothing and external irritants like dirt, chemicals, urine, feces, and infancy. Also, it makes when you don't have this protective layer there, it's going to make the glands less sensitive and it's going to make the skin harder, right? Moisture maintenance. The foreskin keeps the glands moist. Without this covering, the glands can dry out and often undergoes a process called keratization, where the surface skin thickens and loses some of its original sensitivity. Like these are things I knew because I read about this when my ex and I were deciding what to do with our kids, right? And we knew all this bullshit things that they did in birth. Immune defense. The inner mucus layer of the foreskin contains specialized immune cells such as Langerhans cells and produces antimicrobial agents that fight off pathogens and infections. sensory and sexual function, high nerve concentration, gilding mechanism, I'm not going, lubrication, glands, shape and size, the mechanical function, protects your urethra. In summary, the foreskin is a functional, complex organ that provides, it's an organ that protects the glands, contributes significantly to sexual sensation and mechanics, and supports the local immune system. So, like, you know, it has fucking functioning beyond thorns and stuff. Fucking thorns and stuff, right? You know, like thorns and junk. Like, you know, you don't want, I mean, we're not worried about thorns and junk now because we got fucking pants. So I asked about the pain, how painful it is. It says that newborn versus adult circumcision, newborn neonatal pain level is generally considered low to moderate because they can't ask the baby, right? Anesthesia, local anesthesia, like a penile block or dorsal nerve block to numb the area, significantly reducing pain in the procedure. And then afterwards, pain management is Tylenol. So given the Tylenol or sugar water are often used to comfort the infant. They're not ready for Tylenol and fucking sugar water. You've just been born. You're going to take Tylenol right off the bat? And we already know that there's all these side effects to that shit. The infant's pain response is acute but typically short-lived, usually subsiding quickly after the procedure. And back in the Old Testament days, they didn't have anything like that. They didn't have fucking local anesthetic, so they're just ripping that fucking thing off, right? Adult circumcision, pain level generally considered moderate to severe, acute and chronic pain during recovery. Anesthesia, local general region, the pain management, postoperative pain, a significant factor due to the sensitive nature of the area, is typically managed with prescription opioid pain medication for the initial days. 2 or 3 days of opiates and some of these things. So there's all that. So I asked Gemini to compare the pain of having your fingernail ripped off as opposed to circumcision. And, you know, it says it could have trouble to do that. I mean, some trouble. But it says it's basically comparable, but nerve structure, there's more nerves in the penis area than there is. So you think about when they rip fingernails off to torture people. Like, that's a way to torture people, right? By ripping somebody's fingernail off and out, like that area, how sensitive it is under your fingernail, right? And so there's far more nerve endings, like the highly specialized sensitive Mesner and pain panacea corpuscles, fine touch, friction, vibration, dense network of free nerve endings, pain, pressure, and temperature. That's the difference between these two things, right? So it's obvious that penis is more sensitive, which everyone should know. Type of pain, significant acute pain during recovery from an incision in a highly erotic, sensitive area. Intense acute pain during, and this is for the fingernail, intense acute pain during and immediately after from trauma to the nail bed. Recovery for the circumcision, pain persists for days to weeks, exacerbated by friction and involuntary erections. Whereas recovery for the fingernail, pain peaks in the first few hours and then subsides rapidly as the nail bed begins to heal. So, you know, one is days and weeks of pain, severe pain, local and regional general anesthesia, local digital nerve block. And then, you know, they're going to have the post-in. And it goes, the difference between the foreskin nerve endings and the fingernail bed nerve endings. And there's far more in the, you know, it gets into all these things here, which you could look up yourself if you're interested. But it's obviously fucking worse than something that's considered torture, right? I mean, you know, and teeth as well. You know how much your pain you have from having a tooth infection and, you know, toothache and these things. And so it's a fucked up thing. And I'm not even done with this motherfucker's comment. And so that's, you know, so once we started wearing clothing, it became unnecessary for the health risk in the days before soap. Also, sucking on the circumcised weenie isn't weird shit. Saliva has a natural antiseptic properties. If you had no penicillin or honey at hand, it makes sense. So it's not so much a religious practice, it's a healthy practice. Same thing with shellfish or pork restrictions. Imagine I stole your goat. I get caught and go to prison. Not only don't you recover your loss, but now the taxpayer's burdened with my upkeep. No one wins. The Old Testament says, I must repay you 7 goats for the one you lost. So that resolves punishment, prevention, restitution, and justice. And I am deservedly the only one who suffers the loss. What? You mean the one that I stole your goat? Oh, yeah. That this person, like, why would you think you have 7 goats if you're stealing one? You know, you greedy fuck. You know, you mean you already had 7 goats and you're trying to steal my goat? Right? Like, just this fucking moron. You know, that's not an argument. I don't even understand. That has nothing to do with what I was saying about these other things. The only reason you don't think the only reason you think the Old Testament is trash, because of your own ignorance. Try harder. Think a little deeper. Okay, bro. So that was the first comment. Somebody wrote, "Seeing you in dad mode." Who says this about Erica J. Kirk? I'm going through some of the other comments. I want to get to the other. The Bible has everything to do about God. You just don't understand it, and most people don't. Oh, thanks. I can tell from your comment that you do. Here's the other comment. So this person says, "You're really good at current social commentary, but really terrible at explaining social reasoning for circumcision in the ancient world. It's about standing out from others. Ironically, you're not just as ignorant about the ancient Near East as modern Christians are. You're just as ignorant about it's about standing out for others. What does that even mean? Standing out from others. I'm sorry. What is that? Like standing out? Like, oh, look, the head of my dick's been mutilated. You mean like it's like piercings, right? Okay, so let me go through some of these other comments. Fishboy Sheckler. You know, I used to call Trump Fishboy. And here's this one here. Somebody wrote this. This is a weird fucking comment. The king of Israel is the God of Israel. The king of Israel is the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. His name is Kiyomara Kali Sasalsi, the first holy power of the Trinity. Will you change your heathen ways? I guess not. Not changing my heathen ways, bro. You guys can go out there. You guys, you continue your circumcision, your other weird shit. A lot of people were saying TPUSA gay. I'll get into that in a second. I'll be honest. I just watched you during that time. I'll be honest. Okay, because I was worried you're going to lie to me. I'll be honest. I used to watch you during that time, and you definitely helped the world ghoul back. I only fell off because you speak misogynistically sometimes, but I have since come to realization that many men in the system cannot think outside of the patriarchy, and that's just the journey of this life. So I watch now for helpful tidbits. All right, so I don't think I do, but that's whatever this person says. And then just below that, somebody's got a couple of laughing emojis and TPUSA gay. And so I want to talk about both these things. Now, I don't think it's really much of an accomplishment that I brought the word ghoul back, right? Like, like if I was going on a job interview, like put that on my resume. Well, I single-handedly revived the word ghoul. It's not going to get you to have it or anything, but it's a small accomplishment, which I contributed. And I've also come up with some great nicknames. The Duchess of Sucksticks and TPUSA gay. A number of people are saying that. I hope it catches on. So, Fishboy, like that, for Trump. Trump has this expression. I gotta bring that back at some point. You didn't think Charlie was a good debater. You're wrong, Paul. I thought he was a master debater. You're wrong, Paul. Usually gets people banned, but this is a funny joke. I thought he was a great master debater. I got a chuckle when I read it the first time. I used to call Bill Gates Bill Master Gates. So it's along those lines. You're the best. I haven't watched your videos in a while, either because you weren't around or some shit. because I haven't gotten a notification in a long, long time. Yeah, I don't know why they're notifying people again. It's a weird thing that's happened. Maybe because of I wonder if it has to do with the hype button, because people are hyping my videos. I don't know. But anyway, I forgot how much you crack me up, and I'm continuously amazed every time I have thought that I think a thought, and then you say exactly what I was thinking. There's a lot of parallel thinking like that, where people have intuitional things that go on with the Sizemore system. Used to be a reading. There's just a connectivity, and there used to be a reading every Sunday during the group meditation. Somebody, the preceptor usually would pick out a reading, and there was always somebody or number of people who felt like the reading was chosen just for their specific issues, which is kind of an interesting thing. It helps me feel like I might not be going crazy. So thank you for the laughs. Debunking. I've been making videos almost every day for the past like 7 years. And then this one, that was the one about Mark Dice. All right, so let's wrap this one up here. We've got a bunch of stuff to cover for tomorrow. And I'm making a whole kind of Thanksgiving dinner tonight. I bought a couple of turkeys, and I'm like, they have these good frozen turkeys that are cheap at Whole Foods now. And we can have multiple meals, and my wife makes turkey tetrazzini with some of the leftovers. And anyways, I'm not waiting for Thanksgiving, so I'm going to make the mashed potatoes and the stuffing right now, and, I'll continue my videos tomorrow. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.